Nice. Hello, everyone. I want to welcome everyone to the Polynesian Eyes podcast or our Kava live session happening at this time. I also want to welcome new viewers or our regulars from the Polynesian nation around the world for joining us today. And I hope you guys are having a good time so far. And my Saturday or Friday for you guys. But yeah, here in South Auckland, New Zealand, it's a pretty good weather today. Very sunny, not too hot, nice and little breeze. So I can't complain with today's weather. I don't know about you, Tua. Maybe give us an update on how Texas, the weather in your part of the world, is feeling at the moment.
Yeah, Texas had snow Monday,
I
right?
told you,
This is
you can't
this is
run
how
away from the
crazy.
snow, Tua. You can't run away from the snow.
I specifically live in Texas to try and get away from the snow. And I don't know if it's because, ever since my son was born, it was his birthday this week. But when he was born 4 years ago, Texas had that big freeze. We had
Mm.
like 8 inches of snow, shut
Electricity
down
went
many
out.
parts with power.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
I was out of power for like a week and a half. Yeah, week and a half. Had a newborn baby. Luckily, I had a generator. We just all
Mm.
went into
That's
one
huge.
room,
Mm.
had a generator and a heater. But once again, around Homeboy's birthday, we get another polar vortex. And not a lot. We got like maybe, a half an inch. But for
Yeah.
Texas, that's a big deal. They shut down school, right? They
Yeah.
shut down
That is
school
a big deal.
because we don't have the infrastructure to deal with the snow. So yeah, it was good.
Oh, nice. No, and I think the weather didn't only affect to Texas. I saw some photos also in Florida
Florida, the
getting
Carolina,
some
yeah,
snow. Carolina.
the
So,
beaches had snow. It was kind of weird. So yeah, but apart from that, we're getting back to around the 50s, 60s, which is
mm,
good. Especially for winter, that's good weather. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with winter time in Texas.
nice, nice, nice. No, that's good, Tua. Is there anything you think we should start off or anything?
Yeah,
Maybe.
why
Oh, I
don't
was
you
just
kick?
thinking.
Oh,
I
go
was
ahead.
thinking, Tua. I was thinking, Tua. You gotta tell us since the inauguration of Trump being in office, how's the mood? If things feel like things have just changed 360 already, like what's the vibe feeling like since Donald Trump's been installed as the 47th president of the United States?
If you're a fan of Uncle Donald, everybody's pumped, right?
Mm,
Everyone is pumped. Everyone's excited. I will say this: businesses seem to be pretty pumped as well. A lot of the investment, SoftBank and Oracle have that 500 billion they just announced
wow.
that they're going to invest. They're actually starting with the data center here in Central Texas. That's going to be powered by solar. I'm in the solar industry, so that's good for us. And then you also have the Saudi prince said he's going to invest 600 billion. So I mean, everyone seems to be excited. And a big sign is there's very few of the people who were anti-Trump 2, 3 years ago are relatively quiet, which
Mm.
means that's their way of saying, yeah, we needed to change anyway. But I would say overall energy is everyone's pretty excited.
Oh, nice. That's cool. That's cool. Awesome.
Yeah. Why don't you kind of walk through Mussy? We did get an email to the podcast email
Yes.
um, from with an announcement from Apple Podcast, and we've also made some progress on Spotify. These are our Aotearoa fans
Yeah.
and viewers, so kind of share that
Yeah.
kind of interesting news.
Yes. So, just for our viewers to know, we received a message from, I guess, the person that's kind of in charge of like people, how people are ranking, in different parts of the region in Apple Podcasts. We received a message that we're ranked 185 at the moment for the category culture and society tour, I believe.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. So we received a message, and we just want to say thank you to all our viewers, around the world, but especially in the New Zealand area, most likely Auckland too. That's kind of really watching our content and are enjoying it, and we're also still growing too with viewership. Appreciate you guys following our content, and we too and I hope to produce more content and kind of grow our Polynesian Eyes podcast. But yeah, that's kind of what we received, and we were two and I were surprised from from this message because it just came out of nowhere. But it gave us instilled in us let's just say energy to keep going. That what we're doing is it's finding meaning in many people who are watching it. So yeah, unless do I have did I cover everything? Is there anything else you want to add
Yeah.
to that?
Yeah, I mean, some people might be like, "Oh, you're number 185, blah blah blah." That's not even like top 10. Well, for our humble little podcast as a
Mhm,
side gig where we meet and we go live when we can, that's pretty
mhm.
good, right? We're pretty excited about that,
Yes,
and
very
and and
exciting.
especially with the goal of just having people talk about these topics and
Yeah.
have these conversations. Obviously, I think Mussy, you said, I think it's fair to say Auckland is probably city number one for Polynesians around the world,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes. And I just want to let the viewers know too that we received a message from Apple Podcasts about how we're doing well within New Zealand, but we've also received indication from Spotify too, which is another popular podcast platform, that Auckland City is our number one
Number one city
most viewed
in the world.
city
Yeah.
in of our content in the world. So we're doing things, and just think of all the viewers and the fans of the Polynesian Eyes podcast who are
Yeah.
viewing our content.
Appreciate that. Just wanted to kind of share that. We're excited about it. We're
Yeah.
grateful for it. And just want to thank all the listeners and the viewers. Um, Look here. Sorry, got distracted here. We got some comments here. Hey, T Style says
Strong style,
malo kau
malo.
tangata kau palumaya tau kava. Yes. Go
Mm.
ahead. The question is, T Style, Masi, are you what kind of mood you in? You want a smooth experience with the kava, or you are in a hurry? You need a taufua. What's kind of
I,
the feeling
you know
for you?
me, always prefer smooth all the time. I'm
Smooth.
not a big
Yes.
taufua kind of person. I'm always big into smooth because ogumari ang talanoa. I feel like when you're
Yes.
taufua and stuff, it's more of like, oh, just
In a
in a
rush.
rush. Iyo.
Fair point. Fair point. So, Korki requesti T style when you
Iyo.
follow it. Loma says, Loma Huila from Facebook, Malo brothers, we hope that Trump energy trickles across to New Zealand. I hope so too. This Tonga, I mean, Trump is going to he made it very clear. It's going to be drill, baby, drill. The U.S. is planning to be energy independent like it was when he was president last time. So hopefully that takes off as well.
Oh, I just want to add to like Loma's thing. It's gonna, yeah. I hope Trump's energy helps New Zealand to reduce the prices, because the gas is still quite high after the new government's been in. But hopefully for future episodes, I can try to get in contact with somebody that's kind of within the New Zealand political uh arena, to kind of maybe we can talk about how New Zealand can
Mm.
see the positive effects of Trump being in, that's pro business, pro energy, and more of fighting for the good things of the cultural war that's kind of happening with Trump's recent announcement. So hopefully that's in a future episode. I can try
No,
to get
that
in
would
contact
be
with somebody.
great because I know we did talk about um, the let's call it the reflex reaction to
Yeah,
anti Jacinda's left agenda and how there's a more right leaning, even though from the U.S. perspective, the New Zealand right leaning is still relatively left, but
yeah,
more right than the traditional New Zealand position.
correct.
So that'd be cool if we could have that kind of
Yeah.
a discussion there. Another comment here, T Style says, Tika, congratulations in my Post Malone voice, Maria, like the song, congratulations. Yes, a small thing
Nice.
for other people, but we
Yeah,
think it's pretty cool.
pretty cool
Oh,
for a
yeah.
side gig, but Malo
Oh
T style.
yeah, Malo. Oh yeah, well, it looks like we don't just hide away from the interesting comments. Some of our
Yeah,
content, it's no secret. We're part of the Latter Day Saint religion, and in the Kava, when you have a Kava session, we talk about all kinds of topics. We talk about politics. We talk about history. We talk
religion.
about religion. So, some people, I guess, TK, understood. We're not always going to agree. Me and Masi disagree on certain topics. Some
Mm,
topics we agree, but that's just part of the podcast experience we bring.
yeah, yeah.
So, oh Yahweh,
Come to Jesus Christ through Joseph Smith. Eh?
yeah, come. Hey, like I always tell people
Oh,
on the comment
Mita.
section,
Oh,
just come and pray. Just come and enjoy each other. But
man.
Masi Samita, Uncle Mita says, I get taufua foki Masi.
O iloa pe a Samita e ne whonga inu Kava. Can't compete. Okay, Samita, I guess I have to inu taufua I be.
Hey, yeah, okay, Samita, I loto ke lahi. Eh?
Ai loto ke lahi, iyo.
Hey, so these next two comments go back to back. So once again, TK was like, Masi, TK, you woke up today and just wanted to attack
Oh.
someone, I think. I think you just wanted to
Ooh.
attack. If Masi and I can be your punching bag, so get some of that energy out,
Okay.
get some of that beta male so you can be an alpha male after you punch us. So be it. Where TK says leave that cult religion. And then here's the perfect comment from Mr. Kapitawa.
Oh,
That trend
sila.
right
Mao
now, we
sila.
listen and we don't judge.
Yeah,
Right? Have
that's the
you
phrase.
seen that trend, Mussy,
Hmm.
on,
That's
on
been a
social
famous.
media?
That's been a famous phrase that I've been hearing people in my workplace and just other people that I interact with say we listen and we don't judge.
See, 100%. I'm not going to go as far as to say our live digital Kava session is a safe place because that's a little bit too wonky. But
Mm,
we will say, we'll listen. I won't judge you verbally, but I might judge you mentally. Right? And that way we keep it peaceful,
yeah. Oh, that's been
So
real too. That's been real too.
we'll keep it like Uncle Donald's inauguration speech,
Mm,
where after the fact he said, I wanted to talk about January 6th. I wanted to talk, but everybody
yeah.
said no, keep it unifying, keep it blah, blah, blah. So it's okay, guys. We'll listen.
Yeah.
We won't judge verbally. But
Yeah.
but the whole point of the podcast is bring out ideas, and we
Correct.
invite everyone who has a different perspective. We've brought it up a lot of times on social media. People say we don't agree with this idea or this concept. We say
Hmm.
join us, right? Join us.
Yeah.
We'll listen. We won't attack and judge you by attacking you, but we want people to listen to different ideas. And
Yeah.
if you say you have facts about a certain belief or idea, come on, let's have a conversation.
And that's a good thing too. I was just thinking because we even have some viewers who uh, who let's just say are more likely to agree with the history we kind of explain and some of the evidence and the oral history and the ruins that kind of back up our history. But then when because we there's the other category of we talked about religion. Some of our viewers don't agree with that, and that's what we like. We're just
And
throwing
that's
out
fine.
ideas and let's
Exactly.
see people are gonna agree, and some of them, and some are people who are a fan of our idea of this one. And when we talk about religion and sometimes even the politics, they don't agree with that one. But hey, that means you're a human being. You're not gonna agree with everything we have to say, and that's what we want. It's just a conversation of the variety of topics we talk about here at the Polynesian Eyes podcast.
Yes, 100%, 100%. With that being said, Mr. Atearoa, our next topic that we're going to talk through is one of those ideas that was thrown out
Okay,
in
okay.
one of our past podcasts. And, we're slowly working through. We don't, I say we're somewhat consistent with our shorts and other posts of the shorter videos
Mm,
on social media, but it really is dependent on availability.
yep.
Um, but there's a video that we pushed out, a short, I think 2 days ago. Um, if we were to add up all the views from TikTok, Facebook, and all this other stuff, it's well over 10,000 views
Mm,
in 2 days, and especially on TikTok. Thank goodness for Uncle Donald for saving TikTok for at least another 90 days.
mm-hmm.
Um, we've gotten a lot of reaction, right? This is one of those
Okay.
things that has made a lot of people kind of ask questions. But I thought let's talk through it, Masi. Let's watch the short, talk through it, and maybe just give some more context and discuss it a little bit more on our position here.
Okay.
Let me know if you don't hear the sound because every once in a while we have technical issues
Difficult.
here with our we don't have a paid production team, but
Yes,
we do
sir.
what we can.
Of
Yep.
the Kava ceremony.
So let's start it from the very beginning.
Origin of the Kava ceremony started in Tonga because that was the unique identifier, right? It started with the Tongan, the Tui Tonga. I want to tell the listeners, when we say Tonga, we really mean Polynesia overall. It just so happens that Tonga is the capital, and that's what we reference because that's the way we divided the world or Polynesia into our conversations.
And it's the origin, and then that's why there's a lot of reference to Tonga because it's the origin.
So there's that is it, the Falefa has always overseen the Taumafakava, and that's why when it went to Ikanukupolu, it was the Falefa who structured that because that is the correct authority to oversee a Taumafakava.
All right, so
what's some of the reactions to him?
Yes. So some of the reactions, I'll give the verbal summary. The first one is everybody's like, everyone knows Kava comes from Vanuatu. Right? Everybody goes, oh, everybody knows. And I want to do a couple clarifications. We specifically said Kava ceremony. I don't know where the Kava plant originated from per se. Maybe it is Vanuatu, maybe it's not. But my question is the Kava ceremony as the focal point of religious, political, social gatherings of the Kava. The story that we're trying to portray is that's from Polynesia, right? When you go to Melanesia and to other places, they have different names for the Kava plant.
Yeah.
And so really we almost took this as the topic for today's podcast was a deeper dive into Hau'etu, the origin, because that's where the Kava bowl is brought. That's where the Kava is kind of introduced. The Falefa is brought to the forefront.
Yeah.
Those people who structured the Taumafa Kava, which is the name for the kingly Kava ceremony now, but that it was called Furitaunga with the Tu'itonga, but when it was given to the Tu'ikanukupolu, which we remind everyone, the Tu'ikanukupolu had no right to a Taumafa Kava.
Yeah, it was just Ilo Kava.
Ilo Kava. Yes. And so, that's we're taking that position. From my thought process is this. When we look at the origin story of Hau'etu, and then we look at the complexity of the Furitaunga or the Taumafa Kava, how it is a reflection of the constellations in the sky. It is a reflection of the equator and both tropics on the north and the south. It is a reflection of Maui's Kava bowl in there. It's a reflection of the double V that is found all around the world, right? When you look at that complexity, and then you look at, Masi, from your perspective, what is your understanding of the Samoan Kava ceremony? What's the pattern that it's built off of?
To my understanding, the Samoan they call it, I think they still call it the Tanoa, the Kava, which is the Kava bowl, is a representation of like the Samoan house with the multiple poles, right?
It has the nine seating locations.
Yes, and it has multiple legs, right? And that's a representation of each pole of a Matai sitting in that thing, representing of like holding that roof or house that Samoan fale up. So that's that representation of the Samoan style of their Kava ceremony, of its representation.
Yeah, and to me, the Tongan Kava ceremony, the reason why it reflects the heavens, it's because it is bringing down a spiritual or a heavenly order,
correct,
reflecting it on earth, and that's because the Tu'itonga inherited from Tangaloa that royal line, that inheritance, and that is a representation of what Hikuleo did for Tangaloa and Maui in bringing them to Tonga and maintaining that knowledge. And that's a kingly structure. When you explain to me what the Samoan structures, which is my understanding is as well, it's built of the Samoan fale and the Matai system. The Matai system is not a kingly system. It is a decentralized system. And what we learned when we spoke with Siausi Ilayu was that's a common system that was in Futuna and Uvea,
Correct.
Tuvalu, all the other places around Polynesia. It was a decentralized
Yeah.
system, and there was only one system that was centralized, and that was in Tonga with the Tuitonga system. So to me, when I look at the origin story, the Tuitonga being thousands of years old, the complexity of how it represents the heavens, I feel relatively comfortable to say that is the origin of the Kava ceremony in Polynesia. When you start going into Melanesia, there's different names for Kava, right? Even
Mm.
within Fiji, some people were saying on our comments online, "Oh, it's from Fiji." Then my response is, which one? Is it the Kava ceremony or the Yangona one? Which one?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Any
Yeah.
thoughts on that? But just thought we'd have a little discussion on that.
Yes. No, couple things I'm thinking here. First, do you by chance know what the Vanuatu word for kava is? Do they use kava, or is it kind of mixed with that Melanesian
Yeah,
definition for it?
let me look that
So
up. Let's
yeah,
ask
you can look
Brock.
that up. That's
Yeah,
one thing I was thinking of. The other one that I'm thinking of at the moment with the, see, like I said, different islands, right? To what we kind of mentioned, like to now because of the whole colonization that kind of happened in the 1800s and stuff. Samoa really kept up our way of tattooing, right, up to this modern day, because it helps when you're decentralized and certain parts of the family and regions in the Samoan Islands are not too affected because you're a smaller group and you can maintain um, traditions from the past. But I wanna explain also that when we say the kumete, there's a full word when you say the, especially the four-legged, the kumetia Maui. What is Maui known for? As a navigator. And what does
yeah,
the symbolize of the Tongan ceremony is the navigation of the stars, what we implement in our seeding area and the names of the the Tongan circle. Because it's, kumetia Maui is specifically Maui's kumete because it's a Maui. We all know Maui as the master navigator using the
yeah,
stars and constellation, and that's what the Kava Tongan Kava ceremony that Tongans still maintain and hold, which a lot of the other islands kind of don't practice. It's more of a modern with the Matai system, and the other ones what other islands do. But those are the things that like I'm saying, we were all one Polynesian nation. It's just with the whole events that happen, and that's the that's how the world is. Everyone is vying for power, growing territory. Things get lost, but some of our branches are still, like we say, the tattooing, the Samoans still having hold of that. Then we have other stories from the other islands of other customs that Polynesians used to practice. So that's just one area that Tonga has maintained throughout the you know of the Polynesian history, that things have obviously changed, was that old old way of what our ancestors of the past used to do, especially the Kava ceremony, and using and implementing that kumetia, kumetia Maui,
Maui.
which is still, if you see like the taumafa that was recently done, and a lot of the big important titles that are in Tonga that are being done, a lot of that is done with the kumetia Maui, the four-legged kava bowl, and not only that, the kava on the top, it's
Flays
really
open.
flat.
Yeah,
Yes, it's not like it's a really thick thing, like a low fushi thing is what
yeah.
they call it. So yeah,
And
no,
once it, yeah,
that's what I was just thinking, Dua, when we were talking about that. It's just just different parts of our Polynesian nation still hold on to certain things, and at the end of the day, it's just we're all just learning the history and what each island were able to maintain through the many change events of the past. So
yeah. So here, Vanuatu, the traditional name for kava is sakau.
mm,
Okay. Then it says in other regions, you might hear it referred to as malok or grog. So it has
okay,
multiple names for it in Vanuatu. And
mm,
we have verbal or oral history of Tongans going to Vanuatu, people in Vanuatu recognizing that Tongans have been there. So once again, the term kava may have originated from Polynesians, i.e., Tongans, going over there, because just like Fiji, it seems to me, from my observation, the term kava in Fiji is because of the Tongan influence in
mm,
Fiji, and in the more Melanesian portions of Fiji, it's Yangona,
yeah, good. Makes sense
right?
to me.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So I think that's something that's interesting. There's a couple other comments here. T Style says, I believe that as well about the Kava ceremony, even from Tangaloa, Maui, and Hikuleo, not the plant story online with the rat. Hey, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different stories. Some of those stories I think have more meaning to it, and probably has, kind of like Jordan
Mm,
Peterson talks about this. There's a reason why certain stories last so long.
yeah,
It's not literally about a rat, but it could represent a lot of other things. Um,
yeah.
so interesting.
Mm.
Um, yeah. Any closing comments on that, Masi? If not, we'll go to the main, the meat and the potatoes of today's show.
Show. No, no. I mean, no. It's pretty common knowledge that you know, the Tuigang Polu were just Ilocava. Then it transitioned into the Taumafakava with the organization of the Taumafakava with the Farefa from the Tuitonga, kind of allowing the legitimate uh, new king or modern king to kind of be in Tonga. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah. I think
you know,
honestly, Masi, I thought that was general or common knowledge, but the more we have conversations online,
yeah,
because some people are like, "Oh, the Tuicano Polo took over" and all this stuff.
yeah,
You don't understand Tongan politics and structure. And there's like, "Oh, look at that
yeah,
Taumafakava." I was like, "The Tuicano Polo never had a Taumafakava. It had to be given to him." It's
correct.
kind of like how how Tangaloa had to give it to the Tuitonga Aoeitu
Yeah,
in
yeah,
establishing a new kingly line. It's the
yeah,
same thing with the Tuikan Kupolu.
yeah.
Though it was
Nope,
the
I
same
agree.
family between Tangaloa and Aoeitu and his brothers, but when a new title was put in place to be the inheriting title, a kava ceremony was put in place. Tuikan
Correct,
Kupolu never had that. And the
correct.
only way it has it now is because the same thing that Tangaloa did to Aoeitu, the last title holder of the Tuitonga did that for Tupo the first. But
Yes,
people don't seem to understand that, and therefore you get certain ideas of how you know political power is transferred in Tonga is very different from a lot of other
yes,
places.
yes. And therefore, we have the Polynesian Eyes podcast so we can discuss these things. So
Exactly.
everyone can talk about it. Yeah.
Yes. So with that being said, we're going to go into the primary um,
Okay.
focus of the podcast today, and this is a continuation. It's a little late, but I had this video saved for over a month and a half, maybe.
Okay.
Um, Maka, Tuihala Maka, remember him who joins us sometimes on the
Yes.
podcast? He had shared it, and I said, yeah, we've been meaning to get to this one, but we haven't gotten to it. But I didn't want it to get so far away that we never talked about it, at least close enough while it's still relevant in social media.
Mm,
But this whole fiasco with the Tongan Malu and Samoan reaction to, oh, this is ours and it's
mm,
nobody else's in Polynesia. This is a gentleman that is an academic. He's Samoan. He talks about it, but he answers the question in the context of let's look at the bigger picture, right? On what it means to be Polynesian and how colonialism has impacted our view of
yeah.
how the islands were. But we're just going to
Awesome.
walk through it, and then react to it.
Okay.
That has really divided people, which is ironic considering it's a phrase that has joined two cultures, Tongan Malu, and it's caused a massive rift among Tongans and Samoans. So firstly, I want to ask, how do you respond, or how do you sit in all of that?
It's it's um it's quite a complex issue, um, and there's lots of different narratives involved, and I think I certainly want to contribute some stories to help people make sense or make other sense of the issue. I guess for me, if I can start by explaining my bias and why I believe what I believe. So I was raised in an education system that the whole narrative of who the Pacific people are was not only silent, but the very few things that they had to say about us were things like we weren't intelligent, so we couldn't have navigated the Pacific. We paddled everywhere, which is why we're big and strong, and why we're good at sport. And so that whole narrative of we weren't intelligent, we paddled everywhere, they subscribed to Thor Airedale's so-called experiments in the 50s. And so that was the education system I grew up in. And so part of, while I was disconnected to my culture and my language coming up through high school, part of when I left school, a few years after I left school, I did wakaama as a way of connecting to my culture, because this is what I was told who we were. And so I loved wakaama, enjoyed it, did it for about.
What is wakaama? Is that like
That's
siatotai?
no, wakaama is like the alo, the
Siwa
alo
alo?
waka.
Siwa
Yeah,
alo, that's
siwa
what I
alo.
meant. Not siatotai. Not the university religious,
Yeah,
Siwa alo.
ako pa ikaw.
Yeah, I've been away from
But
Tonga too long, guys. Sorry.
no. So that's what it is.
The siwa
The
alo.
siwa alo. So that's what they call it in the Maori language, the wakaama. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, so it's Maori. I thought he was saying a Samoan thing. So that's the
No.
Maori word for
Yes.
those canoe paddling.
Yes. To have
Okay.
the people participating, they still have some races. I think they do it like in Hawaii and Tahiti. Samoa still does it with they call it the Faukasi race. They still do so.
Man, that's kind of died off in Tonga. I remember younger you'd hear stories, but that's not really a big thing in Tonga anymore.
No, and to it's so funny that when I was in Samoa for the 2 years that I was there, they always mentioned that tui ha'apai and
And
the
the
tui
Tuivavau.
wava'u. They would always go to the American Samoa. They would have their flag day, and the independent Samoa would have their flag day, and they would say how the Tongans would always dominate that race, and they would go over, and they would specifically remember the tui ha'apai boats and the tui wava'u boats. But
No,
it's
because
still
that's what
crazy after
I
all those
remember
years.
hearing. But
Yeah,
even though we were so dominant, it just died out, right? Rugby
yeah,
and other
yeah,
things just took its place.
yeah.
So, what are your thoughts about his education and what the Western education was telling him about Polynesian history?
It takes my mind to what you mentioned, Tua. I was still relatively young when all of this was going on, but it reminds me of what you were going to high school and university. How you mentioned that Tevita Fali was the only one saying that we were
Mhm.
navigators throughout the whole Pacific,
And
right?
everyone said he
Then
was crazy.
he was crazy, right? And you remember that, and then all of a sudden we're here in 2024. Everyone has jumped on that boat, right? All the Polynesian because there were Polynesian academics in that time, but they were still subscribing to what the Polynesians were saying. It was just the Polynesians didn't navigate; it was just kind of floating and by accident, kind of
Yeah.
thing. So,
Or hey,
um,
the waves just brought them there like a
yes,
floating coconut.
yes. So that's when he was saying that. That's where it took my mind to when we've had the conversation with you, Tua, when you were saying. I still remember in high school and even going up to university that it was only David Tafale kind of perpetuating the idea that Polynesians were master navigators in the entire world, right? And that was crazy. That was crazy. And then now we're here in 2024, and then everyone is saying, "Oh, dang, Polynesians were master navigators." Kind of all of that. The movie Moana comes out, right? So it's crazy how things have changed in a short time span. But that's
Yeah.
what I was thinking. I don't know if you
No,
had any ideas
100%. That's
or
what I
anything.
was thinking. And I just want to remind people, where did Tevita Fale learn this? From the Farefa in the
Mm,
Kava ceremonies
mm,
when he grew up listening
mm.
to them,
Yeah,
right? Talking about how our ancestors navigated using the stars, right? And how the Polynesian Empire was centered around Kava based off of the Kava ceremony in Tonga. That's
yeah,
where David Tafale learned those things in the right circles, in around the right people. All of the world was saying, "Oh, look at those idiots! They don't know how
yeah,
to sail. They just paddle everywhere." But in the center of the empire, it was
yeah,
known for thousands of years, and so that's something that I think is important. That it is somewhat related to the Kava ceremony because that's where that knowledge from the heavens is reflected. The
Correct.
Tongan Kava ceremony is not, oh, what's the most convenient spot? No, you're going to sit here because it represents the movement of the sun around the
Mm,
earth. The
mhm.
highest point is going to be here where the king sits, and there's a reason and a purpose for those things. But yeah, but like you said, everyone said he was crazy
Yeah.
because he was the only one saying it, right? And what
Mhm.
was their excuse? Oh, he didn't go to university. He doesn't have a PhD,
He doesn't have a
so we
PhD.
don't have to listen to him,
Correct. Yeah.
right? And then now, what's everybody in the academic world? Oh, we need to go listen to our oral history and blah blah blah. Now they've overcorrected, right?
Mm,
They went from denying our oral history to now, oh, every oral history is treated equally. And I'm like,
mm.
oh, no, 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 no. We all know how human beings are. Some
Yeah.
people tell oral history to be entertaining.
Mhm.
Some people tell our oral history because it's driven by politics. And
Yeah.
then there is certain oral history that's tied to the land, that's tied to ruins, that's tied to true genealogical knowledge. Very difficult to navigate those. But
Yeah.
I feel like the academics went from, yeah, all the oral history is garbage, to now we need to believe every single oral history, and that's not
Mhm.
correct either.
Yeah. Yeah. 100% agree.
2 or 3 years, and then I was 40, and I was doing my masters, and I came across Captain Cook's encounter with a Tahitian war party. And so this is Professor Damon Salesa, um, Dame Anne Salmon, and a few other historians um, who had leaned on Captain Cook's diaries to unpack this account. And so Captain Cook pulls up alongside a Tahitian war canoe and finds that the Tahitian war canoe is bigger than the Endeavour. And so, for comparison's sake, the Endeavour is about the size of a basketball court. And
Mm.
so, when I just read that part, I thought, what? But I thought we paddled the Pacific on these small, six
Oh,
packs of
wow.
armor,
This little,
Yeah.
and
oh,
I'm
wow.
seeing this
Going
Tahitian
from
war
one
canoe that's
little island
bigger
to
than the
another one
Endeavour,
that's
and
close by.
that just blew my mind. And then Captain Cook wants to test the Tahitian war canoe for speed, and Captain Cook notes that for every 2 miles he sailed, the Tahitian war canoe sailed three. So not only was it bigger, it was also faster than his sea vessel. And that
Mm.
just blew my mind because I was told we paddled, and now here's the sailing vessel that's faster and bigger. And then the sail design, Captain Cook called our sail design
Crab claw.
uh, crab claw design. But the thing is, a crab's claw's got nothing to do with traditional navigation. And in fact, when you unpack some of the stories, the the strange design of our sails back then imitates a bird's tail. And so um, the conclusion I reached was really, really definitive. And I decided right then and there, we must tell the stories about ourselves. Because when we leave it to other people who don't have the cultural frameworks we have, they will misinterpret, even calling our sail design a crab claw design without even
Mm.
knowing where the crab claw design, so-called design comes from. And then Alston Best, an anthropologist who wrote a lot about Maori culture and language, when he saw the Tongan kalia, he said the underside of the hull imitates the underside of a dolphin. So our design of sea vessels, we've got sails that imitates the bird's tail. We've got hull designs that imitates a dolphin. Just the whole thing of indigenous science. Our science came from the master scientist herself, Mother Nature. So that's where our science comes from. We were masters of STEM before there was such a thing as STEM. So that's our history. All of that is all of that is ignored when you hear Captain Cook say crab claw design. When crab's claw is has nothing to do with it. Anyway, so that's the whole thing of telling the stories about ourselves, and then
Any thoughts
Mm.
to that, Masi?
Yeah. Interesting comment that he mentioned, with the design of the Polynesian boats, right? The bird and the dolphin. How can we get that? Well, we're surrounded by water. We got master fishers. They've probably caught some of these things. And they're like, dude, in order to these are the these people never the not these people, but these animals, right? The birds and the dolphins, master navigators of the sky and the ocean, which you need two parts that you need in a in a in the being surrounded by the ocean to navigate the biggest ocean on earth to try to replicate uh, its designs to being on the boat. So I thought that was interesting because a lot of the boats in Europe, they're not they're just it's just master. It's like trial and error and just pretty much just building it. So it was built for more carrying cargo and like animals and stuff. That's what I feel like in cannons, right? It's to fight. But Polynesian boats, I'm just thinking when he mentioned like the sail of the birds and then the when he said the back of the boats like the dolphin, right? It's really built for efficiency and speed
Mhm.
to get to the other islands before you run out of food and you get to the other island and you can replenish restock to maybe make the next trip. So two different concepts because it's two different kind of people, right? Palangis were thinking it's more of a boat fit cannons fit maybe probably fit like cattle, all these move massive things, which is makes the boat really slow. But the Tongan and Polynesians are more like get to one island quickly to the other one before we run out of food or we starve because we're in the biggest ocean in the world. Things can change instantly and you can get killed. So I don't know. That's what I'm just thinking out loud
Yeah,
to. I don't know if you had any
yeah.
any any
What I
different
want to
thoughts or
build upon, I want to build upon some of the ideas that you have. It is well documented that in Tonga, the Tufunga, right? There were specific families that for generations upon generations, guess what their task was? Perfect how to plant ufi,
yeah,
perfect how to plant certain things. And there are indefinitely certain people, they had a specific task over generations. How do we build the most efficient sailing vessel possible? Right? And that's their whole thing. Remember Captain Cook when we sat down with Xiao Ilayu, he said that the over what 500 pounds worth of food, and they built a structure in seconds almost and stacked it,
yeah,
right? And that's because there were people who were thinking
yeah,
about this. That was the specialization that modern day economics provides in the free market. That is what was going on in the Polynesian Empire originally, right? That's why there's that tanoa of discussion and talking, and everyone, each family had their special knowledge that they held on to,
correct,
right? And
correct,
so that was the knowledge that was treasured within family to family because that's how they built upon it. The other thing too is he speaks about the size of the Tahitian ones. Can you imagine the size of the Carias? And
yeah,
moving right now, speaking with people in Uvea and Futuna say, "Oh, this is where the rocks for the Ha'amonga and also for the
yeah,
Langis in Tonga
yeah,
were carved out of this."
and taken, yeah,
40 tons, 50 tons taken over the ocean,
mm,
right? So to me, I don't know of any other ships in Polynesia that had those stories besides in Tonga, right? This is why the ruins, people always kind of give us a hard time about the ruins, but it's like the ruins have such great implications. Even today, I work in construction. Do you know how difficult it is to move a 40-ton piece of rock? You have to get a
yeah,
lift plan. You have to get engineers to approve it. You have to make sure you get the right type of equipment. And we're talking about our ancestors moved it hundreds, potentially thousands of miles
on a boat. That's
on a
crazy.
boat, right? And then the other thing too is this efficiency of the design, like you're talking about. What's the driver behind that? That's how much movement was going on.
Yeah,
The ocean for the Europeans was a barrier of mobility, but for our ancestors, it was the highway. It was the tool by which we navigated and traveled. That was the primary way. You can walk around all of our little islands in like a day, right? You go to Europe, to these bigger,
Yeah.
but you can spend your whole lifetime walking around the land. But in the Pacific Ocean, in Polynesia, you spent more of your travel time on the ocean. And that's why we had developed such highly
Perfected.
efficient tools. And why is the crab claw? The biggest thing that was unique about the design, and I know this for a fact for the Karia, and maybe it was true for all the other boats as well, is the sail would swing,
Change
right?
the
And
direction.
move.
Yeah.
So it didn't matter. You could technically, in theory, well, not in theory, you can. If the wind was blowing against you, angling the sail and moving it and then using the rudder, you would zigzag, kind of like zigzag, but you could, in theory, go up against the wind. The European boats, when there was no wind, they were stuck. They just sat there.
They just sit there. Yeah.
And wait
Till
for
the
the
wind
winds to
changes.
pick up. So the Polynesians, they said, hey, look, when you're out there, like you said, little food, little water, you cannot afford to bet your life on the direction the wind's blowing. You got to use whatever direction the wind comes, right? Now, if that is true, which this gentleman is kind of saying, and it's well accepted in Polynesia, where is the only ruin in all of Polynesia that is built around determining the seasons, which part of the year has good weather and bad weather, using the movement of the sun? Ha'amonga Maui in Tonga.
And what's it named after? The navigator Maui.
The navigator. Okay, so once again, when we put all these pieces together, please don't say, oh, Tua and Masi are just, they grew up in Tonga, they're just pro-Tonga. Hey, we have Samoan blood, we have Fijian blood.
Yeah.
We're all Polynesian. We believe in the Polynation, right?
Correct.
One of our t-shirts when we get to it. We believe in the Polynation. But we don't just say these things because, we heard. You look at the evidence, and if you really believe that's how we navigated, and if that was that critical, what is the tool by which you determine the best times to travel, when and how to travel correctly? You build a monument. And the Ha'amonga is not only an architectural marvel for Polynesia, it's an architectural marvel for the whole world.
Yeah.
And the purpose further cements why Tonga was the center of the empire. If the Tui Manua or the Tui Pulotu came and said, hey, look, we got the same thing here. We got this ruin, that ruin. We had boats that brought stone from hundreds of miles away to thousands of miles away. Okay, we have to consider that. But so far, we haven't come across that yet from the conversations that we've had. Right, Masi? Unless you've seen something else, but I haven't.
We've had a list of the Tuipulotu names for the first time ever. But other than that, no ruins yet.
Not yet.
To kind of symbolize their functioning empire in that era. No, so you brought up a great point. Now that I'm thinking about it, we had different, class of boats, right? What he saw was just moving a mass amount of people or warriors. What he saw, Tahitian warriors, right? But then you brought it up. I kind of passed my mind. We had the big Lomi Peao boats, right? That were moving
massive
20 tons of rock, right? If that's the oral history. There's some debates with Ewa being the place, but it was a shorter thing. But even just moving it, that's still crazy. But yeah, see, Polynesian, like what you said, Polynesian, if you want to focus on moving heavy stuff, we had a boat for that. If you were focusing on just moving people as quickly as you can and warriors to different islands, we had a boat for that. Like we were, usually the European ships just had those, the armada. You just fit
that was
cannon,
it.
cattle, and that was it. There was no specialization of different boats to move what goods or what weight or all of that. So that's you brought up a good point. That's what I was just thinking.
And the last thing to mention on this as we go back to the video is it is well documented the Tongan Navy, Polynesian, from the ancient Polynesian Empire. That is well documented. And how else does a little island have an empire? We have a modern day example.
Yeah.
The United Kingdom. How was this little island in Europe able to be the
Yeah.
biggest empire?
Influence.
Naval
Yeah.
dominance.
Yeah.
And it is very, very well documented throughout all of Polynesia, even into Micronesia, even into Melanesia. The Tongan naval superiority is what allowed the Tongan Empire to be
Yeah.
what it was, right? And even and even with Ma'afu, what made Ma'afu successful in Fiji in the
Naval
1800s?
superior.
Naval superiority. That's
Yeah.
what was his advantage. So to me, hey, pretty straightforward. You know, some
Mm.
people think, oh, it's bias. Hey, we all have bias, but it seems like there's a
It,
lot of evidence to think the way we're thinking right now.
no, and it's always good to keep discussing this because, like I said, we're just having a discussion. And the more you discuss, you'll be able to know which idea is more sticking out. It's not being able to you can critique it and it's like, oh, there's the flaw in that.
Yeah,
But yeah.
yeah. You know, like they say in MMA and boxing,
Mm.
styles make fights. If your
Yeah.
one idea only
Yeah.
has a right hand and it
Yeah.
can only land it once every 5,000 punches, but there's another idea that can take you down, ground and
Yeah.
pound, and knock
Yeah.
you out, maybe that idea you should consider.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, let's come back to Mr. Sunny.
In that then led me to this other conclusion of in Western cultures, when they have knowledge, they write it down in a piece of paper, put the paper in a book, put the book in the library. If you want to learn, you go to the library and read, or you go to school. But in our cultures, we store our knowledge in song and dance, on our bodies, in the stars, on our va'a, in the forest, in the mountains. That's our library. And so if you want to learn about us, you sing, you dance, you voyage, you get a tatau, you spend time in the forest, because that's where our library is. That's where we store our knowledge. So the body of customs and traditions that make up all these different islands, it's not just customs and traditions. That's our library. That's our record book. And so that's where our stories are kept. So if you want to learn about us, that's where you go. And so, long live the written tradition, and long may it continue. And we should read and be literate and all of that. Long may that live. But beyond that, we also have other ways of storing knowledge, other ways of knowing, other ways of learning. And so I lean on those probably more than I lean on literature. I embrace oral traditions and stories and people's encounters and experiences. I embrace that alongside the written tradition, but I give more weight to the oral traditions because that's not only where we store our stories and our knowledges, but also we are more likely to learn about us in those stories, not in the written stories. And so, academia is about turning a lot of those stories into literature so that our stories can be kept in that way as well. So the stories are, I'm about to unfold are stories that come from that bias, that the oral traditions, people's stories and experiences, I will embrace.
Yeah.
And I'm not afraid of hearing different and contradictory stories because we didn't have this concept of the single narrative. To us, it was all right it was all right to have contradictory explanations and experiences, and everyone's experience was okay to embrace. It was okay to live with contention. It was okay to live with paradoxes. There was nothing wrong with it. And so I'm mindful that the stories I'm about to share.
And before he gets into that stories, once again, like you mentioned, this is why we have this podcast. There's a million oral histories. Some of them contradict, right? But
Yeah.
what I want to express is what we call life. That's
Mm.
what we call learning and growing. We grew up, we all had one way of thinking, but as we grow older, we get exposed to new ideas. That was the whole concept of education. Education initially was not go learn one way to think or learn one idea. It was go get exposed to many ideas,
Yeah.
right? Have conversations, have debates, have discussions, learn, read. I really just want to say that I agree with what he's saying. The fact that the oral traditions contradict themselves or appear to is not a negative, because in science, one guy will do a study and observe this, another guy will do a study and observe something different. We try to understand and find patterns in what seems to be chaotic and make conclusions off of the data. So I don't want people to think like, oh, this is only an oral history problem. No, this is a life problem. Even when we talk to people who saw the same event, this guy explains one thing and then sometimes it's contradictory to the other guy. That's just this guy's perspective of what he saw. Maybe it was the angle he was looking at made it look like this is what happened, and the other person's angle. This, to me, what Sonny is expressing here, this is why we need to have more conversations. Oral history is something that you throw out, people talk about, see what their perspective is, what the weakness is, what the strengths are, and then everybody makes up their decisions from there. Very much like what we're trying to accomplish with the podcast.
No, and I'm just thinking and it's good to revisit and just keep discussing this. This gentleman believes that there wasn't a written history. I'm kind of, and he's kind of saying it's more of you see something that's been done, you just kind of been doing it, and that's how things were just kind of passed on, the knowledge, right? Obviously, you believe that there was a written knowledge, and maybe you can still kind of keep expanding on why you think the written knowledge exists. You think it's most likely exists in the Polynesian society, but
I mean, to me, it's a very simple position from my perspective. Writing things down, you can accumulate knowledge, right? Because writing it down, it eliminates one of the weaknesses of oral history is our minds are not built to remember things verbatim, right? This is why oral histories, let's go back to someone talked about the Kava and the rat and the Kava plant and the sugarcane, right? They're more symbolic, and you have to look at the story. It's easier to remember a story to try and condense bigger ideas into smaller stories that people can remember. When you can write things down, you can get into the nitty-gritty details. And so for me, how else can you remember the nitty-gritty details of this is what the water temperature is, this is the movement of the skies, and blah, 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 and remember all these details unless you had a written thing, right? You had written knowledge. Now, once you lose written knowledge, then what happens? The knowledge deteriorates. Just imagine today. Imagine if from this moment that we are in now, no one could read or write. What would happen to computers? What would happen to manufacturing? What would happen to scientific knowledge? It starts to deteriorate over time because no one can remember everything. Right? And to me, that's why I'm a firm believer that Polynesians had a written language, and it had to be relatively complex, because when we look at the ideas and the behavior of our ancestors, sophisticated ideas, complex solutions to complex problems. I've never seen a civilization solve complex ideas without a written language, in my opinion. So that's why I have that opinion. Maybe, I don't know when or why it happened, but maybe when Tangaloa installed Aho'eitu, there was a major shift, and maybe that's something significant changed, in my opinion. You don't just go Tangaloa, 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 and then, oh, just for fun, let's do a new king, a new line. No, there's something that happened there, just like why did the Tu'iha Atakalaua come into existence? It wasn't like Kaulufo Nuafekai was like, you know what? We're just going to make another kingly line because I'm bored. No, it was, what, 4 assassinations in a row? Then all of a sudden, the Tu'iha Atakalaua was created, and guess what happens? No more assassinations in the near term. So there's a reason why the Tu'iha Atakalaua came into place. There's a reason why the Tu'ikanukupolu came into place. And there's a reason why Laufiri gave the Taumafakava to Po the First. It seems to be tied to significant shifts in political stability or religious stability. Something of that nature caused the change. And so for
No,
me, yeah, that's my 2 cents there, Masi. I don't
no, because
know.
yeah, no, it's good. It's good to discuss this and delve into it a little bit because the only right because I'm not there yet. I'm just and it, what you're saying makes sense to me. It's just that because I'm just the only thing I can think of Tua that's kind of come into play with written is those petroglyphs they've kind of written in Hawaii. I think they only found in
Yeah.
Hawaii and Hawaii, right? Are that is that some form of what it used to be in the past, or is that just like you know of or even some parts of Eastern Polynesia, are those just people of ancestors that were there before, or is that like a form of communication of telling weather I don't know. Maybe can you help me explain, like help me understand? Is that part of it, or is this written language was it's just been long gone that we haven't seen anything yet?
That my opinion is it's been gone for so long we really haven't seen anything
Okay,
of it.
okay,
Because just look at here's an example. Just look at the Ha'amonga, look at the um what's the big man, I'm getting old, man. The work week is frying my brain. Um the big langi in Tonga and Lapaha.
oh the Pai Terea.
The Pai Pai Telea, you look at the Fonua Tanu,
Yeah,
there is scientific, we're not talking about this is a good idea to put this type of rock down and then this type of rock and then this soil. This is civil engineering, structural engineering, and every civilization that we see around the world that did that, guess what? They had a written language, they had mathematics, they knew geometry, they followed the stars, and they understood those patterns because they were able to document that knowledge.
mm,
So, if you really believe that our ancestors built sophisticated structures, and then we ask ourselves, look at all the other civilizations that did stuff like that. They had math, they had written language. So that's the reason why I make that. I mean,
okay,
that you don't. To me, you don't just understand civil engineering and structural engineering just by talking to people. You have to
mm,
you have to you have to document it, and you have to be able to do calculations on it to be like, yeah, that's good, right?
mm,
Now, once somebody has documented and you've done the action many times,
mm,
then the oral history can maintain it, right? Hey,
yeah,
I don't know why, but if you put the corner of the man, Masi, I'm struggling. The langi, what's the langi
yeah.
again in
Pai Terea.
Paipatelea? If you make the corner an L shaped with
Yeah,
these dimensions in proportion to the size of what you need to do, if it's this size, the foundation needs to be a minimum of this. You
mm,
can remember orally proportions, but
okay,
you cannot remember orally how you built and came to that conclusion. This is one of the reasons why I didn't like math growing up,
mm,
because I didn't have good math teachers. The math teacher would just tell me, this is how you get the answer. Follow this equation and you get
mm,
the answer, right? It's not until I see YouTube that they explain to you the reason why the circle, the angles inside of a triangle equal to 180 or 360, and then they draw the squares on each side, and it says when you put squares on each side of the triangle and you put everything, it makes a circle 360 degrees. That's why the inside of the triangle equals that, or whatever, right? They give you a reason on how you came to that calculation. And so that to me
okay.
is a reason why behind it. Looks like there's a few comments kind of
Yeah,
getting away
and,
from
and it's
us.
still an ongoing debate. I mean, I'm not there yet to it, but like, man, it's hopefully there's some discovery that we can add on because right now all we have of at least something being carved up or like some kind of sign is those written kind of I think they look like people from Hawaii and Hawaii, but
Yeah,
yeah,
and
hopefully
I
you never
didn't
know.
know this, but Xiaoxi Layu said that they saw certain carvings, markings
Mhm.
on the langis as well.
That's
Obviously,
correct.
they've eroded, but he said that there are specific carvings that seem to be some type of language.
Mm.
Um, let's see here. T Style says, question: do you not believe that because of our Karifanafana and that, like Aristotle and Hermes taught, communication to complex societies in the form of public speaking, meaning oral traditions?
Mm.
That's kind of my comment earlier, T Style, is to understand how to get an answer, right? To follow a sequence to get an answer.
Mm.
Yes, oral history can explain that, but the how and why you develop, like Pythagorean theorem, you don't get the solution to Pythagorean theorem by just oral history. You have to document the idea and prove it out in a mathematical and a documented way, right? There's a way to say a squared plus b squared equals c squared, right?
Mm.
Like that there has to be a way for you to document it out, the complex idea. Now, to communicate the formula, you can use oral history, where you're like we teach in our schools. If you ever want to know how to get the perimeter of a circle, it's 2 pi r.
Mm.
But do we ever, well, how in the world did we come up with pi?
Mm.
Where does 3.14 come from? And why is it a 2? And why do we multiply it by the radius?
Mm.
Right? That's what oral history can explain. 2 pi r, 2 pi r squared for the surface area. But how that idea was developed and the solution came, my opinion is you need a written language to get there. So at some point, our oral history is all that we had. We were able to explain the patterns, but even over time, those patterns were lost because we lost the written language. And over time, we lost from instability, right? From war.
Yeah.
When war happens, all of a sudden, nobody cares about 2 pi r. Everybody's just about, I just want to live today. 2 pi
Mm.
r is not going to save my life when a polvai is coming towards my head.
Okay.
Any thoughts on
Good
that,
question.
Masi?
No, 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 no. Like I said, I'm still learning. I'm not there yet. I'm still, you provide a good argument, Tua. I'm just not there yet. I'm just more the believer of I've just seen it done this way. So, and I'm just seeing it so many times. It's a more ingrained, and I just go with it. At the same time, I'm still understanding human. We're very flawed people, so maybe we do things maybe a bit shorter. What we used to do from our ancestors back then, you know what I mean? Because, like you said, there's times of wars or something, so things change a little bit. But yeah, I'm not there yet with the whole written language kind of thing. But like what you said to it, and we went through it like very thoroughly with the whole Fonuatanu of the amount of before you even put the soil, you put like bunch of sand, little tiny like gravel rocks, and then you put like all these layers, right? And you're talking about an acre every year, doing it over 100 years. I'm just like, there has to be there had to be something, and I'm just thinking maybe the people, the engineer, the tufunga of the Fonuatanu just taught maybe other tufungas that were with him. They just kept going. I don't know. I'm not there yet, but I'm just like I said. I think this is something that we need to keep discussing every time so that we can figure out if there was if there's more arguments or new evidence for written language, or it's still what most people, which we're still kind of in. It's just we just saw, keep doing, and just kind of repeat the pattern. But at the same time, like I said, it's when you get people and you always tell the stories, it's through song and chants. And sometimes when you do song and chants, you do it to make it more synchronizing instead of maybe telling the full history. But
Accuracy. Yeah.
yes, but it's still there. That's what I'm trying to say. But yeah, I don't know.
No,
Let's see.
100%, 100% agreed. Let's come back to Sunny. He's going to go, I think it sounds like he's going to get into some oral history.
Okay.
There are people that might have counter stories. Cool, bring those stories out. The reason why a lot of our oral traditions are lost was because we stopped telling stories. One of the weaknesses of oral
Yeah,
traditions,
it's
once you
war. You
stop
talked about
singing,
civil wars or
once
whatever.
you stop talking, once you stop sharing stories, you start forgetting. And so, if some of the stories I share brings out contradictions, bring it out, correct me. If I've got the wrong story, correct me. I want to hear those stories, and I want to be telling, if there are more accurate and better versions of what I share, bring them out, educate me as well. But it's no good being in the shadows and people keeping them to themselves,
100%.
because that's how we lost all of these knowledges in the first place, eh? So so that's where I come from. So some of the stories I'm about to share come from that place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely awesome. I love that because I totally resonate with that, with understanding our Indigenous ways of storytelling and the truth and I guess the core center of how we came to be who we are. So thank you for sharing that. So I guess with in terms of inviting discussions and opposing views, do you think that the way that this has played out, being on social media, being in a time where social media is sort of our space of talanoa these days, how do you see this talanoa having played out there?
Well, it's tough because I think social media is not a reliable place to have these conversations. I think it's still better face to face or in groups even. People are getting into podcasts, but social media is such a tricky forum, and it invites a lot of I don't mind the discussion and I don't mind the counter narratives, but it also invites a lot of scorn, a lot of and people just playing around with the discussion. Whereas if we were in a proper forum, that would get people would be dealt to straight away. Say, hey, let's just focus on this, and you don't get that monitoring in social media. So I think it's a dangerous place to have these discussions, but that's where these discussions are, and so there's no way we're going to shut that down. We just have to figure out a more intelligent way of going about it that way. So I think it was a brave move for the sisters to come out publicly like they did, because then that invited everyone in on the discussion, and so that's what social media does. But then again, you can't keep this quiet. The whole point of what we're doing is to share, and so yeah, my hope is I can help bring other stories to the table that people can pick and choose from. I think the 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 bottom line for me is who is a Samoan, because the divisiveness that's in the discussion is, oh no, it's a Samoan this, it's a Tongan that. So the question for me is, who is a Samoan that they are entitled or not entitled to whatever is declared Samoan. And so I think my position is that when you let the divisions of the Pacific dictate who is a Samoan, if we let these Western national boundaries tell us who was a Samoan, then I think that's where we get in trouble. So to say that only Samoans can have this, we then lean on the idea that only people that live on these set islands are Samoan. So if you don't live in Savaii and Upolu and Manono and Apolima, if you don't live on those islands, you are not Samoan, or if you don't connect to those islands. And I think that's because we have let the Western national boundaries tell us who's a Samoan. And so the question is, what about American Samoa? Are they Samoan? They compete against us. They compete against us in the Pacific Games. They have their own team, their own flag. And then when there's Commonwealth Games, they don't even feature in it. It's just us. And yet at the Olympic Games, they're not even there altogether. They compete under a completely different flag. And according to that flag, the USA flag, they are more aligned to First Nations Americans than they are to us. And so if we let these national boundaries tell us who is Samoan and who isn't, our own people, American Samoans, are put under a completely different nation. Okay, let's put that aside then.
Let's talk about, we've talked about this, right? Like these ideas of Samoa, Tonga, Tuvalu, right? Cook Islands. Those lines didn't exist back then.
Back in the day.
He brings up, back in the day. So what are your thoughts, Masi? Anything you want to comment on any of this?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts with the whole he mentioned about with the social media and people taking another form. I feel like it's gonna be hard to go back to that because I feel like social media, especially now, in order to get your word out, it's the only way for people to communicate and feel involved. So I feel like that's going to be a norm, and I think he kind of mentioned it where this is going to be it's going to be it's almost like freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is always going to be a good part majority, but you can get people who's going to say some nonsense things, but it is what it is, right? Social media is going to be a platform for everybody to throw in their ideas, and there's going to be some stupid ideas for people to engage in, but it's to me that's always going to be the first form of dialogue. I would say, Tua, social
Mhm.
media people throwing it, but like in order to let's just say um, really talk about it in like what he said, and then I agree with it. To really discuss this, it's always going to be better to like in a forum or something, But it's always to me any idea that's thrown out there and it's really discussed, and to get the mass amount of people and to get other people who have different ideas. I think the social media is going to be here to stay for the long run. I mean, I just think about Donald Trump. It's because of social media he's able to communicate his idea unfiltered, right? It's not going through a certain medium or a uh, uh, certain mediator like the mainstream media has been done for many many years. Um, it hasn't been done that way. So I feel like social media is going to be the first part of platform, and then to really develop and to really have all the ideas kind of gathered from like the social media platforms or like broadcasters or anything, then you can really get those people into like a conference room or something and then have a dialogue. But I feel like the first form of dialogue is always going to be social media, mostly good, but you always there's like I said, there's always people who are not smart, and they're always going to just play around and not take it serious, or just throw whatever. But that's my idea when he talked about with the whole dialogue of social media being played into it. And that's why it's kind of and it's good, even though it's very fiery and maybe hurt feelings or hurt or whatever. To me, it's the best place to have the greatest amount of people to participate and to really, you know, it really helps you to get a variety of opinions. But that's just me, though. I don't know if you had anything
Yeah.
to kind of talk about that. That's what I was thinking
No,
first.
I agree. I think what I'll add to that, Masi, is this is why long forum podcasts have exploded,
Mm,
right? Because social media in some ways is changing
yeah,
in this sense. We're used to the social media of a short clip, right? You can't get a full context of an idea. It's kind of like the sound bites, right, from mainstream media. So there's that part of social media that makes it difficult because you don't get a full idea. You're just getting a minute, 30
mm,
seconds, 40 seconds. But when you sit down and you have a conversation with someone for 2, 3 hours, that's a whole different ballgame. There's a reason why certain politicians
yeah,
will never sit down on a 2 to 3 hour podcast with someone who's not just going to concede to them what they want to talk about.
mm,
Because when you go through the long forum, it's more natural and people can see through you. If you're putting on a performance, you might last 30 minutes, 40 minutes,
45.
but
Yeah,
after 2 hours of talking,
yeah,
the real you is going to come out. And I think this is where Kava sessions from traditionally for our ancestors were so important. It
mm,
wasn't let's just sit down, drink taufua, and then go back home. No, we sit down. If there's an idea that's brought to the table, it will be dissected, and
yeah,
everyone's gonna give. And it's not a sucker punch and then leave. No, you put out an idea, you defend it, you discuss it. Some people will agree, maybe not. Maybe you learn, oh man, my idea only had one submission, but everybody else's idea has got 4 or 5. I need to
mm,
figure out whether my idea is worth
mm,
believing anymore.
mm,
But
mm,
you accomplish that through long forum
mm,
discussions, consistent discussions. And to me, you know, that's where podcasts are coming in. if all you care about is a soundbite, you're just gonna skim through.
Yeah.
The idea of the short videos is to, hey, maybe this is worthwhile listening to the whole podcast, not just to 30 seconds of it. But and I agree 100%. There's no way to get around it. I don't know about you guys in New Zealand, Masi, but in America, or at least me, I never thought this would ever happen to me. I don't even own cable TV anymore. But when I was in college, that was like, I have to have cable. I got to watch the mainstream media. Now I don't do that. I get my news from social media and podcasts. That's where I get all my information.
Yeah.
You know,
I think it's
because
changing.
It's changing. I don't trust third party to keyword the information and bring it to me. I say, you know what? We live in a day and age where I can go directly to the person who's reporting out in the field. This is why X became such a big deal, because so many reporters who were kicked out of their stations, right? Mainstream media, they just went and did their own shows online. And now they don't have to behave a certain way because a boss tells them, this is the story that's important to me because some politician is talking to me. The reporter can report on what they believe in. And if you trust a reporter, you'll follow them. If you don't trust them, ignore them and find someone else on social media to follow.
Yeah. Slowly changing here in New Zealand because there's been a bunch of layoffs with some of the media companies here in New Zealand. So people are definitely tuning out of the traditional way of receiving news.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, Tua.
Island.
We'll talk about, and I also mentioned with the with the whole national, creating boundaries, right? That's the dilemma we're going through at the moment, right? When you've been under a boundary and saying this is the boundary, because I think we both talked about it, right? Samoa, as Samoa being like an independent nation, was only existed, right, as when colonization happened, and then with the whole separation of American Samoa, because it was just the way Europeans. That's how Europeans function. This is your country. This is your boundary. So we're gonna do the same and cut. It's the same thing they did in Middle East, which is causing a lot of issues and stuff, right? And even in Polynesia, that's something that we as a people need to discuss. That, right? We are believer of a Polynesian nation that existed in the time, being the capital of Tongatapu, and then the bunch of the islands. We can call it like the Greek island states kind of thing, I feel like that was more of the correct term of the Polynesian nation in that time, more similar of like the ancient Greece, which is the bunch of island, bunch of states with Greece, which sometimes the capital kind of moved between Athens and Sparta, depending on who was kind of in charge, right? At the time of the Polynesian Empire, Tonga was the capital, but then we had like the head boss, like we kind of mentioned, the 5 generations of Tui Tonga living in Ha'amoa for many years before they're coming back. But like the whole meeting and the ceremony of the Inasi and Polopolo was always conducted in the capital of Tongatapu. So to me, that's the more accurate way of how the ancient Polynesian history was back in those days. It was more, this was the capital, and these are the island states that surrounding the Tongatapu capital. But that's just me, Tua, and that's the battle, right? And it's very difficult because we have so many. You're right. We went to the education system that said that this is Samoa. We created like, just thinking of like Samoa when it got its independence, right? This is what happened with our history. We're a sovereign nation. We, you're talking about days of how you got your independence, and it's not going further back how we were one nation with Tongatapu being the capital, right? And that's part. And this is why the Polynesian podcast is here. And when we're available, is to perpetuate that idea, and we give evidence and reasons why. And we kind of shared those evidence in this earlier podcast and many other episodes in the past, and there'll be many episodes in the future talking about the idea of Polynesian as a nation with Tongatapu the capital, and are talking about our various island states of Ha'amoa, Niue, Fortuna, Uvea, and Hawaii, all of that. So that's just me. I don't know if you have anything
100% agreed with that, Masi. I think you covered that very well for us.
Okay.
Malo. Let's come back to Brother Sunny here.
Okay.
Of Olosenga or Olohenga. About 100 years ago, a Palangi family bought the island, renamed it Swains Island, put it under Tokelau, and then strangely they participated in the blackbirding of their own people. That family arranged for Peru or slavers based in Peru to come and steal about a third of Tokelau's population to participate in the blackbirding practice of that time. Anyway, so Swains Island is under Tokelau, but the history of Olosenga is Manua. Their bloodlines, all their genealogies come back to Manua. And so are they Samoans? You know, according to the national boundaries that the Westerners have made, they're not, but according to their genealogies, which is how we count who are our people, they are us. Okay, let's put that aside. The story I'm about to share, a small group of us visited Tonga in the mid-90s, and we got an audience with the king of the time, King Taufa'ahau Tupou IV. He's the father of the current king. And so we had an audience with the king. He was unable to actually share time with us, but he sent his historian to have a conversation with us and to explain to us the king's position on the relationship between Samoa and Tonga. And the king's historian asked us, what do we know about the relationship between Tonga and Samoa? Me being the Fiapoko, I said, all I know is that Tonga used to rule over Samoa for a few hundred years up until the rebellion. And then the Tongan's historian, you know, the official position of the Tongan king, he said the story of Tonga and Samoa is not one people ruling over another people. The story of Tonga and Samoa is one people divided by class, a ruling class and a working class. And after a few generations of cruel leaders or dictators, the working class became a slave class. And what history tells us about slavery, rebellion always follows slavery. Nobody wants to be a slave. And so the rebellion happened, and then the rebellion was successful. The ruling class left. And so the ruling class, they went south. The islands they came to, they named Tonga. Tonga in every Pacific language means south. Even here in Aotearoa, Te Tai Tonga refers to the southern tribes. And then the Tongan king said the ruling class that couldn't go south, they went north. The islands they came to, they named Tokelau, meaning north. In every Pacific language, Tokelau means north. In Samoa, we say To'elau. Here in Aotearoa, Te Tai Tokerau referred to the northern tribes. And so here's us ancestrally, genealogically, one people, but the national boundaries invented by Westerners have made us different people. And so when we say the question, Samoan this and Samoan that and Tongan this and Tongan that, we are ignoring our ancestral links, our genealogical links, and we are letting these Western divisions tell us who was us and who was not us. I really like what Letofaya Tu'u Kalala said. Even if you have just a little bit of blood that's connected to me, you are mine, I am yours. And so to me, that's that extension. We are, even if it's just a little bit genealogically connected, however many thousands of years ago, they are us, we are them. So how can we say, no, but the Tongans can't have this because it's not theirs? When we only come to that divisive position because we've let the Western national boundaries tell us who is Samoan. And the concept of Samoa and Tonga go way deeper than these national boundaries. And so, even as far as some of the islands in Solomon, Taumako, and some of the islands around Taumako, when they unpack these genealogies, they ngafa back to Savai. Some of the royal titles in Rarotonga, Uenuku, Tangiia, and Karika, they ngafa back to Savai. And so when you ask the question, who was a Samoan? Exactly. But we have to answer that question not using these national divisions that the Western world have imposed on us.
Well, pause it right there, Masi. What are your thoughts on the king's historian? And he wasn't very clear on Tokelau and Tonga as to whether that's when Tonga was settled or whatever. But
Hmm.
what are your thoughts on that? And just kind of the whole narrative that he's kind of talking about.
I do lean towards his agreement that, like I said, like we can always say, right? It was more of a class. What class were you in? You're in the Tufunga class, which is a specialization that you're very valuable into society. Then there's the right Mariner subscribed that there's the people who do the umu. That's what they do. It's just the cooking and stuff. And then there's the people of the leadership, and then there's the Taula people. I do believe that's how Polynesian society was, right? You're in a certain class, and you can probably, and to me, that's why it's even in Tonga, it's a big deal on your marrying, because the only way to maybe to elevate is either you marry somebody from a higher class or somebody who's tufunga, because and you're from a umun, but you for some way if there you want to elevate, there's even you get one of your daughters to marry to somebody else to elevate.
Mhm.
Your whole family's right. I feel like that's how it was, Dua, because that's how it is. It's sometimes, especially in Tonga, when your families want to, marriage thing is a big deal, and many of the families and stuff. I feel like that's how it was, Dua, unless you're born and you were good in, sometimes you were doing well when they had their sports games. We kind of talked about wrestling, Dua, right? You can probably get
Mhm.
elevated if you're a good wrestler and you're entertaining, right? There's different ways, and I feel like that's how it was. Everything was a class, and like what he mentioned, the leadership class was, kind of settled in Tonga. I feel like maybe there's a different nuance, and it will be, now that I know he does sound like he's somewhere in New Zealand here, that I'll try to reach out and try to get get him, because he'll be a good person to discuss. But like the detail, like how he said they came down, were different opinion on Tonga being the first place in Polynesia and then kind of spreading it. But I do agree with his position of, we were we were in a class society. It wasn't like Tonga was the society. It was just Tonga was the leadership here. It was just managing different kind of people. And then when that leadership was being too cruel, there's bound to be a revolt and little scuffle here and there. But like you mentioned, after that scuffle, Tonga still came back because
Yeah.
right, right. Kaulfonua Fekai, right?
Who's after Talakai Faiki came back.
He still came back, and he stayed in Savai and built his Puremere kind of location where he was residing most of the time during that time. So right, so that's why it makes more sense. We were more of a Polynesian nation than the leadership of that time just decided where to kind of go and stay and stuff. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on breaking his thing down. It'll be a good discussion to have with him, just to maybe get more into details of that discussion with the historian. Um, you're right. So it wasn't the king. Tupo the Fourth wasn't there, but he just sent his historian, which is interesting because with David Tafale's communication with Tupo the Fourth, they had it face to face, and it was a
Mhm.
more of directly from the source, right? Instead of the king's historian sent out. But that's just me, Tua. Just regarding that part of I do believe it was more of a social class in those times instead of us being like different people, kind of thing. I don't know if you had
Yeah.
anything else.
No, 100%. So there's a couple things I want to touch on because
Yeah.
we get this argument a lot from our Samoan brothers and sisters, right? They say the reason why Samoa was the center of the empire because Tonga is south and Tokelau is north. And he seems to believe in that concept because he says, oh, the ruling classes that were Samoan left to Tonga and some went to Tokelau. That's why the origin is Samoa and they went north and south.
Yeah. Yeah.
My question is this: what was the name of the ruling class? Tui Tonga.
Yes.
Okay. So the Tui Tonga went to Tonga because that's where the center of power and the seat is, right?
Yes.
And what I find funny is when Talakai Faiki said Marietoa, He says, he didn't say, I'm never coming back. He says, I am coming back. He said himself, I
Yeah.
am coming back. But when I come back, I'm not coming back as an oppressor. I'm going to come back as your
Yeah.
friend.
Mm.
Okay, which could have been like what he was saying is, that oppression became overly burdensome. Xiaoxi Layu takes a different position. He says that it was a religious rebellion, according to Xiaoxi Layu and the oral history he's talked through with some people in Samoa, and from the Tongan perspective is um, Talakai Faiki wanted to go to Hikuleo instead of Tangaloa,
Okay. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that and that the rebellion was oppression, but there are certain ideas. I'm putting this on the table so everyone can hear. There are certain ideas that the rebellion was a religious one,
Okay.
that our Samoan brothers and sisters didn't want to make that switch. Anyways, the thing I'm coming back to is this. Everyone keeps saying, oh yeah, some of the leadership was chased out of Samoa and went to Tonga, that's south, and then Tokelau north, some leaders. And I'm like, you do realize that that's hundreds of years before Talakai Faigi was Aoetu.
Yeah.
And if you believe that it was a ruling class, then the ruling class was in Tonga visiting Samoa.
Correct.
And when they
Yeah.
returned, right? And that to me is funny. And I just want people who say, oh, Samoa is the center because of Tokelau North and Samoa and Tonga South. Well, that's a pretty small empire,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? If that's what you're saying is the influence, that's assuming that story is true. Here's the other one. And this is going to be in an upcoming episode. I found a study that studied off of the oral histories, the relationship of Samoa based on these oral histories to Fiji, to Tonga, and to Eastern Polynesia. And in the summary of this study, it says almost all the oral history tied to Samoa is kind of like Teevolo, like spirits. It's always of a supernatural nature. There is very little strong evidence going into Eastern Polynesia, right?
Mm.
The highest level of consistency in the oral history is with Tonga.
Yeah.
So that study is interesting because it goes
That is
against this narrative of, oh, the reason why the Tui Tonga went to Tonga was because Samoa was the center, and when Talakai Faiki was kicked out, the leadership class left Samoa and started a leadership class in Tonga. No. That leadership or that leadership class was already in Tonga, and they were
Yeah.
exercising their leadership in a
In Samoa.
burdensome way in Samoa. In Ha'amoa, that the Ha'amoa people said, you know what, this is a little too much, and
Yeah.
you're not giving us enough value. Anyways, I wanted to throw that out there, and so
Good.
that everyone understands the reason why everyone knows Tonga is because the cardinal direction for Polynesians was south, and the reason why south was the cardinal direction because that's where Tonga was.
Yes.
So that's something for 90% of Polynesia. South was Tongatapu.
Yeah.
That's where 90% of Polynesia, you go south, you're heading towards the capital. That's why that is the main direction.
No, too, and that's why I said with the origin, I don't think he got that right or interpreted that right because right, all the ruins,
Mhm.
even when you add in the studies, everything points to Tonga being the oldest settlement. So in order to have that, and like we mentioned, Tonga's leadership and control of Polynesia as a whole that gave them legitimacy is because they were the first to populate, and then people getting that aiki or that knowledge because that's what legitimized them to be a leader in their certain islands because of the connection to Tonga, because of Tangaloa being the
Yeah.
first kind of leader to settle in Polynesia per se from the Americas, which we
Yeah.
believe
That's one of the
to
founding
be.
fathers, right?
Yes, right. It's very different to like how Europe and a lot of other regions of the world that it was kind of military dominance. It was that I mean there was a little bit part of that was Ka'ufonua, especially with the many assassinations. that was happening. It does seem like he did go on a military campaign, but most of the Polynesians' history was just peaceful and was just legitimacy because of being
Religious. It was
associated
by
religious
religion.
religion contact with Tonga Tapu. So
So you
and I want to
basically
throw in there.
say, sorry, Masi,
No, you're
religion
good.
and family ties. That was
Yes.
the main binding thing because we're all the same people.
Yeah.
Even Captain Cook said these Polynesians are a single nation. They
Yeah.
speak the same language. They have the same technology. They have
Yeah.
the same religious beliefs. These are one people. This is one nation. He even called Polynesia a nation.
There we go. There we go. And I'll just also add in there that De Vita Fale is also saying that what we know as Tonga being south in a current understanding now is incorrect. He is proposing that Tonga back in the days was north in the Polynesian. If it was kind of upside down, right? Which Tonga was the north and how they viewed the map, and then Tokelau being the south. That's how. I just thought that's it's
Yeah,
different from
because
what
that's the
we
cardinal
view.
direction, right?
That's the cardinal direction.
In
And
the Western, when you look at a map, if it
yes,
doesn't point to the north, up is always north,
north.
right?
Correct.
In the Polynesian map, when there's no indicator of showing the direction,
Yeah.
south is always the top because it's
Yes.
pointing to the capital, because
Yes.
everything is pointing to Tongatapu,
Yes.
because
Tongatapu
that
is
is
the
the
capital.
cardinal direction. Everything is based off of where's Tongatapu.
Correct. Correct. So I just thought I would throw it in there, which David Tafale has. He's the only one. I haven't heard anyone say that. Only one saying that Tonga is up on the Polynesians' viewpoint of the world, and then Tokelau is south.
Yep,
But yeah,
100%. Lot of comments on Facebook and on YouTube. Appreciate it, guys.
mm,
Unfortunately, to keep us on track, we're
we're
gonna
gonna
keep
move on.
plowing through. So I
Let's go.
apologize.
When we look at those deeper histories, you see that we are deeply connected to a lot of the other, or actually all of the other islands. Um, that perhaps it's true to say there is no Tongan Maru. In fact, it is right to say there is no Tongan Maru because the concept of Tonga and Samoa and Cook Island and all of that are not our words. But when we use our words and our ways of determining who was ours, then these women who live in the islands considered Tonga have every right because ancestrally, genealogically, they are us, we are them. And so they had every right to do what they've done because, you know, it belongs to them. The fact that they call it Tongan and call it Samoan, I think that's where
Yeah,
we're having these problems because we've leaned on Western namings and Western national boundaries to determine that who was ours. We know who was ours, and it's in our bloodlines, it's in our genealogies. So that's my position on it.
Yeah.
We are more than these national boundaries that the Western world has imposed on us. Okay, I've talked a lot. I'll give it back to
No,
you.
that's okay. I love it because you're answering heaps of things here, and I'm like, oh look, yes, keep going, Matua. I got it, got it. But I
pretty
think
good
that
points.
was
I think we
good then,
agree
I
with
guess,
a lot
especially
of that.
where you said that's
Yeah.
probably where we're getting where the divisiveness is coming from is calling it a Tongan malu, and then you've got the people claiming certain parts of it, but that's from that Eurocentric idea of saying that we are this, right?
Yeah.
So then, what would be a proper term to call it if we don't call it a Tongan malu? What is there? What would be? What would you say?
It's the same with the Tongan tatau, the means tatau. There was no such thing as a Tongan tatau. In the old days, when royalty wanted the tatau, they would get a voyaging fleet together and voyage to Samoa together because we still practiced it. And so they didn't go to get a Samoan one, they got their one. It was theirs. There was no need to call it something else because they had every right to have that. Now, the so-called Tongan Tatau is a fairly new way of expressing Tonganness, and cool. That's the way cultures adapt. Cool, and because it's now different, they want to call it a Tongan Tatau. Okay, that's the way the culture's adapting and developing. So be it. But there was no such thing as a Tongan one. This is historically because it was ours as a extended family of the Pacific. We all had it, and so the
I just
Hmm.
want to make a quick comment on that, real quick. I agree with the concept here. And obviously, it seems like Samoa had some pretty good tattooists. There were tattooists on Tongatapu as well. And it's well
Yeah.
documented. Tongan women had Malu type designs, Tongan men. And it was actually more common in Tonga
Yeah.
than it was in Ha'amoa. Because if I understand correctly, and you can correct me, Masi, the tattoos traditionally were for, like, not want to say royal, but high chiefs and their children, women, and
Mm.
other high chiefs. It was not a standard practice
Mm.
that was used. In William Mariner's book, the average warrior in Tonga with William Mariner had a tattoo. And
Correct.
and George Vason, and I can't remember if it was George Vason or William Mariner, they made fun of them because they didn't have a tattoo. Because
Yeah.
it was kind of like being a man is like you get your
He was George
tattoo.
Mason. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they
Yeah.
made fun. So that's one thing. What I want a lot of our viewers to take into account. So why did the Tu'itonga go to Ha'amoa? One of it could be, hey, they were really good tattooists there. The other one is no one in Tongatapu is going to touch the Tu'itonga. You're
Correct.
not supposed to touch him.
Yeah.
So you would go further away. This is the same reason why
Further
it's
extended family. Yeah.
yes. This is a way of managing power, right? You would go further away, just like the Tu'itonga would usually have his sister marry into Fiji, because he doesn't want anyone in Tongatapu
Yeah.
to regularly marry to his sister and have children that would be achy above him in the family scenario. But having them marry into Fiji kind of diffuses some of that quote unquote social power building up in his family. So a big reason why he would go to Ha'amoa or to someone else is because in the local vicinity, to maintain that sacredness, you don't have someone close to you, around you a lot, get comfortable with touching your body, because no, you only see me in our class relationship, and you getting that access to me would in a way inflate your position, and I don't want you to have that inflated position, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, and I do feel like with the evidence that the tattooing kit found in Bea,
The
correct?
oldest,
The oldest. So it's something that it was probably practiced amongst just regular men and women just getting tattoos. Not You didn't have to be in a high position class to get it, right? So I feel like it was practiced many times, and like I think that's a very good point, Tua. You brought up some of the Tuitongas and and I've heard many of the Tuikangpolu title holders, they will just go to Ha'amoa and get it done there. Distant relatives and families, and like you say, you still hold your prestige in your locality area. But
no, 100%.
Malu, cool. The patterns on the Malu are not strictly Samoan patterns. They are patterns that are seen all over the Pacific. And that's where I was making the comments that the original Malu was the star map, because we all use the star map. We all, we all used the same stars to navigate the Pacific until colonization brought an end to it. I really like the position Le Tofa ya Ili Alpha Mayava put it. And he was talking about, in one of his posts, he was talking about the nose flutes and the restoration of the nose flute, and how it was the Tongans that had brought back the nose flute. And he's saying, but people are calling it the Tongan nose flute, but it's not a Tongan nose flute. It was a nose flute we all used. It's just that the Tongans have restored it. And so he was saying, thank God that the Tongans have restored it for us. Because imagine if they had kept it to themselves and said, no, this is ours because we'll, find keepers, you revive your own. But they didn't do that. They revived it It's been called the
Another
whangu
good point.
whangu, but it was something that we all had. And I really I want to add to that something that I enjoyed that Eliota talked about in a recent post. Imagine if the Satawali's master navigator Maupia, look, imagine if he took that same divisive approach and said, no, we're going to keep traditional navigation to ourselves. You know, if you lost it, that's your fault. It's your problem. It is a Satawali's, it's a Micronesian thing. But he didn't do that. When in the 70s, when the Hawaiians wanted to restore the art of traditional navigation, the Satawali's were one of very, very few islands in the Pacific that were still practicing it. And so Maupia went to Hawaii. He saw what colonization did to the indigenous people. He went back to Satawal and said to the elders, give me your blessing. I'm going to go teach the Hawaiians traditional navigation. And the elders in Satawal said, no, this is sacred knowledge. We're keeping it. It stays here. If you go, you are banished from this island.
Runaway Simba,
And
never return.
and Mao
Mm.
said, I've seen what colonization does. The native people in Hawaii, they don't even belong to their own. They have to fight for to be a part of their own land. They are treated as second-class citizens. They have to fight for their language, and colonization and the westernization have shoved them to the side. And he said to the elders, if we don't share our knowledge and replicate it, the same thing's going to happen to us. And so the elders still said no. And so he was banished from his island. He went to Hawaii, taught the Hawaiians about traditional navigation, and he made them promise, you only do this under one condition. You are not allowed to keep this to yourself. You must share this knowledge. So the Hawaiians, over the decades, Hawaiians shared it with the Tahitians, they've shared it with the Cook Island, they've shared it with Aotearoa, and then, Samoa, Tonga, Fiji, and all of that. And so imagine if Maupia had taken that divisive stance. No, they're not us. Um, and so he said, they are us. There is no such thing as Polynesia and Micronesia and Melanesia. Those are Western boundaries that never existed for us. And he said, there's no such thing as Polynesian navigation and Micronesian navigation. It's just one navigation that we all practice. And he said the people on the east side of the Pacific, the stars that rise where they are the same stars that set where we are. And so the navigation was exactly the same. And so we are starting to learn about our history and traditional navigation because of him. When the elders saw what...
One thing I want to bring up real quick, and then maybe it's a nuance, doesn't matter. But this is what David Tafal has been working on for 40 years, 60 years, whatever it is. Developing those star maps, those navigational maps that the Tongan keepers of that knowledge had and shared with him.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know what Mao, I don't know what years that was. You know what years this Mao guy?
I'm thinking, is this, so they're saying, he was saying that it was in Micronesia they had the knowledge of the using the constellation of navigating, and then he went to Hawaii and taught them. Is that correct, Dua?
Yeah, yes, that's what he's saying.
Right. And I'm thinking, is it during that time of Nainoa Thompson? You remember him, Dua?
The
You know,
guy
it was a big,
who's doing the ship in Hawaii?
yeah. Isn't that during that time when he first sailed from Hawaii to Tahiti? And I'm thinking it's during that time. I don't
So
know
that is like
exactly.
what, the 90s, early 2000s?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm
Yeah,
thinking.
so yeah, I mean, and David Tafal started restoring this back in what, the 80s.
Correct.
So, and this is the thing. I don't know. I mean, obviously the Polynesians went into Micronesia,
Yes.
but I don't know if I would go as far as to say that same knowledge is the same knowledge that the Polynesians had. It could be,
Yeah.
maybe there were some Polynesian families and that were there. But I also want to say this. I'm not convinced that every Polynesian knew this knowledge. Like we discussed earlier, there were classes of people.
Yes.
Certain people had this knowledge, and it wasn't common knowledge for every Polynesian. there were classes that had access to this information. This is not something new. We live in a world today where certain classes have access to more information than we do, right? That's just society in general. The one thing I will say, kind of tying it back to the written knowledge, and this comment came from when we spoke with Xiaoxi Layu, is if there was a written language, he doesn't believe that it was amongst all the people, right?
Mm-mm.
That
That's a
this
good
written
point.
language could have been with a certain class of people, certain families, which could make sense because with the tufunga and how everybody behaved, certain knowledge could have been um, limited to there. But I do want to say that, you know, that knowledge that Mao has, it's probably accurate knowledge, but I don't know if it's the same knowledge as how the Polynesians viewed it.
Correct.
They probably understood the same patterns, but we're talking about the names of the stars, why they had those names,
Yeah.
right? Did they
It,
build it off of the same? Because I saw some of the Micronesians have like a little star map. They use sticks
mm,
and they drew
mm,
star maps. I don't know if it used the same double V knowledge that
yeah.
the Tongans had,
The sun
that you
compass.
see
Yeah.
in South America, that you see in Egypt. So, I mean, there were other civilizations that could navigate the world, but it wasn't necessarily the same structure as the Egyptians and in Central and South America as it was in Polynesia, in
Yeah.
that relationship.
No, and I'm gonna just mention this, and this is what I would just critique on Sunny here. That's why I'm not a big fan of just saying the Pacific Islanders because I do think we were different people with the Poly. Like I said, we were Micronesians. Their customs and the way they do things is not. It's not a Polynesian thing. With their interactions, yes, but they had their own ways of like we kind of mentioned navigating and maybe the way they practice their customs and with the association of Kava is different than a Polynesian way of their associating with the Kava. So and plus, when you say Pacific Islanders, you can go as far as like I said, Pacific Ocean is so huge. You're stretching all the way
Japan,
to the Philippines, Japan. They're different. That's why I'm more of the Polynesian people as us being a unique. We interacted and we're master navigators that went and mingled with certain people and even brought some people from that different nations and mingled and
yep.
integrated them. But to culturally distinct us, I do think we're a bit different, and that's why I'm not too fond of always using Pacific Islander because the Pacific Islander, you can
I
say
mean, that's
Japan.
more politically correct, right? To talk like
Yes,
all of
right.
us, be more
That's what
inclusive.
he and right, and he's more of the academic, which academics always use that word a lot, and I do, and that's why, like I say, with the census, because I think every Hawaiian, and that's why it makes a big difference when they do the census in America. They put Hawaiian, and then at the slash, there's Pacific Islander or Polynesian or other or whatever. At least it's somewhat the same. But in New Zealand, it's still different. They put Maori, and then that's a separate category as a Pacific Islander or whatever. It's a lot different. That's what I'm trying to say. If they just put it like even just say Maori and Polynesian or Pacific Islander, that's a little bit more thing because at least we're the same. New Zealand's a
Yeah.
Pacific Islander. That would help with us with this having discussions that's instead of starting we're the same people, we can discuss much more details on the the cultural influence of the Tuitonga and how that's kind of played part in Polynesia, right? But when you talk with
Yeah.
somebody who thinks they're totally different, then you have so much ground to make up to finally get to the core stuff that we want to talk about. That's just my thing of why I would just kind of with Sunny's last comment on those things regarding Micronesia and saying we're just all one Pacific Islander kind of thing is like nah. There's a different association of people groups with Micronesia and Melanesia because they weren't part of the Tonga Empire, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Maybe at
Yeah.
certain times, if we went and marry, or maybe for sometimes in the Solomon Islands, because there is
Trading, right?
trading,
Do stuff
right?
like that.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, maybe at that time, but I don't think I think we're totally culturally and even custom and our customs are just different. And I'm using my example of how we perceive of associating with the Kava. But
And
that's all.
that's what I was going to dig into, Masi. That is why I believe the Kava ceremony was so, it was the unique identifier, which is what we
Yes.
said in that video, right? If you show up at an island and you say, I'm from Tonga, I'm representing the Tu'i Tonga, and if those people set up a Kava ceremony to receive you, you start
Yes.
to, oh, these are our people,
Yes.
right? They understand. But if I showed up and they didn't know what Kava was, they didn't
Yeah.
know how to structure the Kava ceremony to properly receive, then you could say, oh, these are not our people. We're probably
Mm.
either going to have to trade or let's be more cautious because we might have to defend ourselves. Who knows what,
Yeah.
right? But yeah, to me, that's where we bring in that Kava ceremony because that's a huge
That's a,
differentiator.
that's how you know you're a
You're
Polynesian.
Polynesian.
Yes.
Yeah. If you call the Kava Yangona, then you're like,
Mm.
yeah, this is not part of our, shared culture and religion and people.
Yeah.
So, all right.
I agree with that.
The fruit of the work that Maopialo had done. They asked them back to the island, and they made an apology, made everything right. And now, when people want to undergo the master navigation ceremony, they all go to Satawal for the poor master navigator ceremony. And so they've kept alive what we all practiced. And I think we need to see the Malu and the Tatau in that way. All the other islands of the Pacific have forgotten that heritage. So let's be good stewards of our cousins' knowledge, of knowledge that we all shared, and let's
Yeah,
not be
I
greedy
agree
with
with
it.
that.
And
Mm.
let's be good stewards of it and pass it on to those who also had the same thing as us. That's my position. And so, of course, these women should have, these sisters should have it. Their genealogical lines come back to us. You know, we are them, they are us. We embrace them as such, and the patterns that they get, well, that's on the tufunga to give. But I think that there are more telling motifs on the malu that speak more about traditional navigation, and but that's up to the tufunga, that's up to the master tattooist. So that's my position. And again, a lot
Mm.
of that is because I've leaned on our own oral stories to embrace those stories, embrace those, the wider, the yes, I'm Samoan, and long may that national boundary live. I'll carry the Samoan flag, Manu Samoa forever, the blue wave forever,
Wee, blue
Mm.
wave.
and long may the Red Sea, the Tongan Red Sea, long may that live. They've taught people how to be patriotic,
Yeah.
and long may that continue. But we also have connections beyond those boundaries. And so let's
Correct.
not forget that. Let's not let these national boundaries divide us.
Mm, mm. No, that's beautiful, Talanoa, and I'm glad that you touched on as well about the motifs, seeing similar motifs in navigational styles throughout all of our people. So I guess for a cultural context of why a malu or a be'a would be received, can you give us a little bit of a Talanoa about that, like a little bit of an insight as to why someone pre-colonial, pre-Christianity would have received markings like the malu or the be'a?
Yeah, so this comes back to the whole thing of the when we let other people tell our stories. And so, reading a lot of the literature, I had read that Tatau was marks of leadership, marks of a warrior. I thought, cool, I'm getting one. And so I got mine in 2012. And it wasn't until I got into that and I got it myself, spoke with others who have it, spoke with Tufunga, spoke with heaps of people about their voyage, their journey, the why they did it, how they did it, all of that. And it was through those stories, the those who have the cultural framework to make sense of the tatau, that I learned that the tatau and the malu are not marks of leadership, but marks of service. And so everything that's put on your body is your promise to your family. Here's your service to your family. And so, traditionally, if you got a tatau, you are saying to your family, anything the family wants, I'm the first in line. I'm the one that does this. I'm the one that does that. They're marks of service. And that's where you get the proverb, le ala i le pule o le tautua, the path to leadership. is through service. And if you are true to your promise that you've marked on your body and you've served your family, then they're going to see your service and give you these chief titles, which is where you get your authority from. But that all comes from service. And so these marks are your promise to your family. I'm the first one you come to when it comes to service. I'm the first one to put my hand up. I'm the first one to bring money to the table. That's pretty much what your promise is when you get these marks. It's made me rethink my position on Fa'alawe and the whole thing of Fesoswani. I used to be, oh no, I don't know them, I don't know this. And so since I got my tatau, I've started to rethink the way I serve my family and the way I do things. I've still got a long way to make it right in that regard, but I'm in a position where I can do more and better for my family in that regard. And so that's what the tatau was about. The marks of service, not marks of leadership.
Any thoughts on that, Masi?
No, see, and that's the thing I want to maybe talk about a little bit more with the marks of the Tao. I'm just thinking, I feel like anyone. I don't think it was. I don't think there was something that you had to do to get it. I feel like if you wanted to get it, you could get it. That's just my position, Tua. I feel like
Mhm.
it was just like a thing. If you wanted to get a tattoo, I don't think it was you had to do something, and then when you do it, you prove. I don't know. That's just me, because I feel like when you're in a stable society for such long periods of times, right, and then the practicing of tattooing, feel like it was everywhere. You could bring something, maybe ufi or some crops, bring it to somebody who's knows how to da da. You give it to them, and it's almost like you will get it. I feel like that's how it was back then to how it is now. You get some money, you have some money to give to a tatao, and you can
You
get
get
it.
it.
You're right. Like we can talk about the nuances of you don't want certain people to touch you. That's different. But I'm just saying, you can get somebody further relatives to do it for you because you want one. I feel like that's fine. But I don't feel like it was a thing that you had to do or prove yourself in order to get one. That's just my opinion, Tua. I'm just thinking of I'm just thinking if you had people who were, let's just say, middle class, and they had some things to give to a tatao, because I feel like the tatao was a tufunga, which is an elevated class. In order to hold the elevation, you got to have wealth. What is that wealth? You have some crops, some ufi, maybe kape, and maybe some puaka. You have a bunch of that at that store, and then your payment is the knowledge of just know how to do the tatatao. And I feel like tatatao was very specialized because there's probably some bad tataos that people would die, and that means you were not a good tatatao because you didn't do it right and give the proper
And the
instructions for them
infection. Yeah.
infection to heal right. The very good elevated tataos were the ones who were able to do the tattooing and they were able to survive. That's just my opinion, Tua. With the whole tatatao stuff, I don't think we're making it a big deal how it is what we're saying you have to do service or it was some kind of leadership of Matthias. That's just my opinion. And I always go back to my wife's grandfather who is turning 90, and he was a 21-year-old. He played for Manu Samoa, one of the youngest ones in Samoa. And he told me that Talatau was not a thing in Samoa when he was growing up. It was just a revitalized thing. And then people, they only know a certain family that was doing it, and they would go over. Of course, you go over and pay whatever you can, pay it to them, and they'll do the Talatau for you. That's just what I've heard. And I feel like that's how it was. Whoever had that knowledge, you can monetize it and you kind of move on there. And it's the talatao. That's their job, is to think of why making that's important, make you feel like you should have it. That's just me. Why you should
Yeah, it
have it.
makes economic sense if you're a
Yeah,
tatatao tufunga.
yeah. And I feel like your economic, and like I said, if you're a tufunga, and there were tufunga talatao in those days, and I feel like when you have that skill and you maintain it with your family, that was your economic life and your rank in society in the Polynesian, or and your rank in your family and the wider community. That's just me. I don't know if you had a different um,
Yeah.
thought on that, Dua.
No,
Just
I
regarding,
agree.
do you
I
think it was a
agree.
yeah? You think you had to do something to get that tao, or was it just like a if you wanted to get it, you can get it?
I think in the modern context that what you're explaining to me makes perfect sense, right? As it when it gets restored and it's coming back, it's more a mark of wealth. I mean, that's how tattoos are now, right? If we go back to like the 70s, tattoos were kind of like, not necessarily the high end people were getting tattoos or the upper middle class. Now in America, the upper middle class are getting it. And you know what people see when they see a really good tattoo? Man,
Mm,
that's a lot of money, right?
mm.
I know people, some of my friends, they're like, oh, I'm trying to save up money because I want to get a tattoo over
In
here and it's
thousands.
going to be like thousands of dollars, right? And so it's in many ways, it's now a expression of wealth. Yeah, it's of your personality, but to get a really good tattoo ain't cheap,
Yeah.
right? And to get it done right. What I was thinking was more of if I accept his idea, let's just assume that his explanation is correct. And I'm sure there are people who explain it that way, right?
Mm,
To me, according to my limited understanding in Samoa, it was limited to men and women of nobility. That's what I understand it. Like when we go back to the beginning. And it was a way, like for the women, it was, hey, if you don't know who the daughter of the high chief is
mm.
by face, well, you're gonna know by the tattoo. And
Okay.
if
Yeah.
you mess up, that to me, that's what the tattoo, because like you said, doing a tattoo thousands of years ago was high risk. If you don't do it with the right person, don't do it right. So it is a sign could be a sign of prestige,
Mm,
but it was more of nobility under the Tuitonga rule and influence.
mm.
However, as it switches to a Matai system, one could interpret what he's saying as the Matai system says, because that's what he said, how do you get your title? Oh, by service and
Mm.
by giving
Yeah.
monetary contributions, you get your title, which giving monetary things to the village and the stuff and getting a tattoo, well, that's just two layers of paying the tufunga, right? I mean,
Mm.
it's the same idea that you're saying, but it shifted a little. And he says that's how you get your title is given to you. Very different from the Tongan concept of leadership by class. You aren't given to be the Tuitonga if you don't have the Tuitonga
Blood.
bloodline,
Yeah.
right? You can't just go and say, oh, I'm gonna go give you 1,000 ufi. I'm the Tuitonga now. Give me the Tuitonga tattoo or
Yeah.
whatever it
Yeah.
is. So to me, I think it's interesting that if you go back far enough, it sounds like tattoos were a birthright, right?
Mm.
If you go back, then at some point there was a transition into, oh, yes, tattoos were by birthright, but now that we're in a quote unquote Matai system and all these chiefs can be handed names, a monetized system, if you want to call it, then
Mm.
tattoos become much more prevalent. Then it starts to reflect what you're saying, right? Where now it's monetary impact to get your tatatao, where the traditional way is it's by birthright, and it is by birthright you have an obligation to the people and the country. And that's why I always wondered why, dude, why the heck does the kava taste terrible?
Yeah.
Right? Why is that the drink? Because leadership is bitter, right? So as you get older and you understand the true responsibility of leadership,
Mm.
when we're young, all we think of leadership is
Get the
the
nice thing.
influence, the
Yeah.
nice things. You don't realize that leadership comes when you do it right,
Yeah.
comes with a lot of bitterness, a lot of suffering, a lot of sacrifice. And to me, that's why the kava is like the perfect
Representation.
mechanism
Mm.
to represent. When they sit in the tamafa kava and they hand the kava, they say, "This is the land
Yeah.
that we're giving to you in this title." And yes, it's given to you by birthright, but that doesn't mean you don't have an obligation to serve the people. This is one of the things that, as I've gotten older, I have a greater appreciation for the royal family and how they've behaved in overseeing Tonga.
Mm.
Not just the Tupou family, but the Tu'itonga and going back, there was an understanding of to do this right, there's sacrifice and it's bitter, right?
Mm.
That's why Kava is bitter. But if you take on that bitterness, you take on that responsibility, it can result into a soothing and a sense of fulfillment, which is the outcome of Kava, even though it's bitter. So that's just my philosophical expression on how Kava fits in with it on a birthright system and getting your
Mm.
tattoos, and a new system that Sunny is expressing, where this elevation
What
to
you
a title
contribute.
is not
What you
birthright;
contribute.
it's what you
What
bring
you
to the
contribute.
table,
Correct. Mm.
right? So it's a shift in a way of thinking, and there's no perfect way of thinking, but it is important to distinguish different ideas, which
Yeah.
once again we've discussed this very heavily. A Matai system, which is much more democratic,
Mm.
is not an effective tool to build an empire. This is why America is not good to be an empire
Yeah.
country, because every 4 years we have an election, and it's
Different
very
change.
difficult to have changes in leadership. But why is the TUI system built for empires? Because you can have the same guy in charge for long periods of time, same families, same customs, same blah blah blah.
And
You can build an empire from there.
Like what you said, and you get the son. The son is been understanding what the father wants. The son is an extension of the father. It's going to continue that same the strategy
Yeah,
moving forward. Then there's your grandson. Same thing. Yeah, it's just a lot more
yeah,
consistent in building an
yeah,
empire.
100%. One of many reasons why we lean towards the Tu'itonga as the only real foundational piece to build an empire in Polynesia.
Correct.
Okay, let's try and finish Mr. Sunny here. We're coming up on just over 2 hours.
Okay.
unmute, unmute. I can't hear you.
There we go.
Ah.
That like fully sorry. That fully blew my mind because like there's a whole other talanoa that I would like want to dive into about like what you're just speaking there, like that I won't touch on because then we'll just go on this way and I'm getting the Zoom notification 10 minutes
Oh.
left. I'm like, oh, okay. But yeah, so I'm Maori Samoan and I'm still on my journey of reconnection to my Samoan side and trying to navigate that trauma of it all and stuff. And I know for a lot of people, sometimes that first step to
What is
Dang,
her
what kind of
Samoan
trauma?
side, like kick her in the face or something? Like I don't understand the
Shit.
trauma. Like I don't know
I
what
think
do
she's.
you have
I
any
think
idea what that's about?
they're, and that's the thing. They're having this association with the Pacific being so, the colonization being so trauma that these people, these generate the Polynesian, some Polynesian state that it's trauma that's inhibiting their progress to their goals in life. I don't know. That's what I'm thinking. She's trying to mention. I guess it's still a trauma for her being Samoan or getting to know her Samoan uh, family history. But I don't know. That was a
I
bit
mean,
weird.
I mean, you and I are Hafekasi. We grew up in Tonga.
Yeah,
I got picked on all the time for being,
yeah,
palangi loy.
yeah,
You go
yeah.
on a rugby game in Tonga, and the first person, every
They,
opponent goes,
they want to test
"Kupe
you. They want to
palangi
test you.
gal."
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
want. Never did I feel traumatized from that. I didn't like it. It actually made me like, okay, I got something to prove now,
prove. Yeah,
But
yeah.
I don't understand, and I think this is one of my beefs with the academia. Okay. First, they're the ones who come and say we're stupid. And then now they come and say you're a victim. That's
Mm.
like, okay, this is why I don't trust institutions. This is why I go straight to the source to get the information. Because these guys, they messed up the first time and they're messing up again by bringing this mentality of, oh, you're traumatized. For what? For being Samoan? For being Tongan? For being Hawaiian? No, man. I'm proud to have
Yeah,
those things.
yeah.
So I don't know. It's I don't know. I
That was
had to stop.
interesting.
I know we just
Yeah, that
started,
was
but I was like, we're getting back into this, and she's like, I'm still trying to get over my trauma.
still trying to get to
Sister,
know my Maori and Samoan side and dealing with the trauma. That was very interesting. sentence she brought up.
Okay,
Shit.
we'll go back now. That just came out of nowhere.
Mm.
Healing is receiving a tatsau. And do you think that this would be a correct way to make those first steps, or is there more internal work that you need to do first before committing to, something like that? It's like something like receiving a tatsau.
Okay, I want to hear your thoughts on this, Masi, because we've had this discussion, right?
Yeah.
They're making the tattoo sound like it is the pinnacle of the
Yes.
culture, right? Like
Yeah.
this is, and I'm like, it's a good piece of the culture. I guess I'm not going to get a tattoo,
Yeah.
right? But that's more driven by religious and personal preference. When I was younger, I was very interested in tattoos.
Yeah.
And actually, I think the day I was going to get a tattoo with Polo,
Yeah.
Unga found out and stopped it, right? And I'm kind of
Mm.
grateful for that because I was going to get some big tattoos. And I'm glad I didn't do that because right now I'm like, if I had it, would I be ashamed of it? No. But I'm like, it's better not to have it anyway. But
Mm.
where did this idea come from that I need to prepare myself for a tattoo? I need to get over my trauma. I need to reconnect. The only way I can reconnect with my Polynesian side is to get a
I
tattoo. I'm
know.
like, I don't know.
Yeah.
This is kind of strange to me because to me, that's kind of really dumbing down the value
Yeah.
of our ancestors. And if I had a choice of keeping tattoos and being an independent nation and maintaining a
Yeah.
active civilization and leadership for thousands of years, in a heartbeat, I would sacrifice the
Hands down.
tattoo.
Yeah.
But just kind of
Yeah.
want to get your thoughts on that because
Yeah. We kind of
this is
touched on
kind of
it earlier.
strange
Yeah.
mentality. But yeah, kind of give your thoughts on that, Masi.
Well, see, too, I'm just thinking, right? Let's just say we had no. Let's just say we're in the. Where's the high, kind of the peak of the Tuitonga Empire? 1300s, 1200. Was it a thing for us to worry about our culture kind of things? And we had to get a tatatao, right? I don't think so. I feel like we're walking around the village, we're at peace. We're under the Tuitonga Empire. And let's just say I'm a young 21-year-old male, or let's just say you're a young woman. You're like, you're a very productive society, and let's just say you have some stuff that you can give away, and maybe you want to get a tattoo. I feel like you just go to the Tufunga's house, ask, and say, "Can I get one? You're very good. I do like that style. I do like it." And then the Tufunga says, "You know what? I know your family. You guys are important to society. Of course, you're gonna give me some stuff too, so I can do it." And then that's it. I don't feel like it was right. And that's the thing. That's part of evolution. With the whole colonization, people feel lost, right? People feel lost, and for them to feel like they want to be close, like this young lady is saying, she's still trying to discover her Samoanness or Maori and stuff. In order for her to feel like, or on that journey to discovery, she feels like she probably needs to get like some sort of tattoo or some other male to feel the same way, right? And then they make it as the pinnacle, and they feel like they've gotten there. When we know when you don't know the real Fa'alamelame, the Kavenga, and not only just those two things, and also just keeping up family relationship, that's a lot of work. Like we're talking about you taking time to go to families you haven't seen, let's just say for many years, and then trying to integrate and get to know them. That takes multiple trips and maintaining that. That's already a lot of work. That's a lot more difficult. And then preparing yourself to feel like if you get a tattoo and you getting that, and then you feel like your work is done. There's nothing else you really need to do or anything. To me, keeping up family relationships and multiple. If you're a Polynesian, you have multiple families that you need to keep relationship with, and then not only that, then attend to certain family get-togethers or events that they need the family's help to achieve a certain goal or a certain target that the family thinks are important. You need to attend. That takes a lot of work, and that's a continuing basis, and pretty much until you drop dead. And then when you get to old, then you're more of, when you get to a position like you're 70 years old, then it's your job is to direct your descendants to continue doing what you've been doing when you were young. You know what I mean, Tua? So that's why I
No,
say that's that's a
100%.
much that's a much more difficult thing than just getting a trying. You're doing this journey to figure out your identity, and as a Samoan, you feel like getting your tattoo is, you feel like you've achieved that. But it's like, if you feel like that you're gonna do it, then okay. I'm not gonna take that away from you. But if that's what you perceive that's important, then that's an individual thing, but it's a lot deeper than that. But that's
No,
just me too.
100%. No, 100% agree. And this is where it comes back to why it's important to understand, to say it a million times, we were a Polynesian nation. Tonga as the capital, and understanding how that structure was, understanding the big picture will play a big part in understanding how you can navigate yourself as a Polynesian. Because it goes back to what you were saying, Masi. From all indications, what held the Polynesian culture and empire, whatever you want to call it, were two things: religion and family. That is like the deepest level glue that held our ancestors together, right? Your ability to recognize a higher being and a faith-based mentality. And I don't want to hear anybody saying, "Oh, I don't believe in God." Everyone has a God,
Yeah.
right? You can't avoid it. If God is whatever your number one thing is, if your number one thing is being a rugby star, well, that's your God. If your number one thing is getting popularity, well, that's your God. Whatever it is, whatever your religious orientation, which everyone is religious, I don't care who you are, right? I have a friend, he says he's agnostic, doesn't believe in God, but his God is philosophy, and his priests are the philosophers, and that's how he follows and behaves. So anyways, I'm coming back to religious observance and dedication to the family. That is how the Polynesian Empire was built and maintained for thousands of years. If you want to understand what it was to be like our ancestors, and you want to connect with what it means to be Polynesian, I would suggest that those two things are the two biggest things you can do, because that's what our ancestors did, right? They had a God that they believed in, and that's why they respected certain people, because those people represented the God that they believed in, right? And then every family had a role and a responsibility, and you dedicated yourself to helping that family achieve those roles and responsibilities and the relationships with each other. That, to me, will give you more insight into what it means to be Polynesian than getting a tattoo. Because getting a tattoo, go save $600 to $1,200. You can get a tattoo, you know. But it's it's like Auntie Noah said, no one realizes how expensive it is to be Tongan, right? Because that's the one thing that Chelsea first realized when we got married. There's always a wedding, there's always a funeral, there's always a birthday, there's always something. And like you said, Masi, you do it till you die.
Yeah.
And that's not easy, right? There's a
That's
reason
not
why.
easy. Yeah.
There's a reason why people don't do it, because it's difficult. It's a lot easier to go get a tattoo.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why, for me, I think in many ways you're devaluing what it means to be a Samoan, to be a Tongan, or just Polynesian in general, when you aren't sacrificing with your family and being diligent in a faith-based structure. Because that is, for all intents and purposes, from what we can see, that's what made our ancestors great. That's what made our ancestors maintain relationships over thousands of miles. And that's what makes us unique to the world today. What are Polynesians known for? Faith and family. Even today, that's like you go watch any major documentary on a Polynesian, 99% of the time they're going to say faith is important to them, family is important to them. And why? Because that's what's in our DNA. Our ancestors have been doing that for thousands and thousands of years. And that's why we have that tendency, right? That comes a little more natural to us. So I wanted to stop there because I just felt like, man, you're kind of undervaluing the Polynesian contribution by saying, how do I prepare myself for a tattoo? I don't know.
Yeah. No, I
Anything
agree.
else
No, I
to add
agree.
to that, Mussy?
No, no, and it's something that we're probably gonna keep discussing because our Polynesian people are definitely living overseas. So I feel like this is a topic that's gonna we're gonna keep
Coming back
discussing
to.
about coming back to. So yeah, that's about
Yeah,
it.
and I want to reiterate what you said, Mussy. We're not trying to say tattoos are evil. No, if that's something that's important to you,
Yeah,
that's fine. But let's put it in perspective, right?
yeah,
That's a small piece of what it means to be Polynesian. Don't make
correct.
it the main focus of what it
Yeah,
means to be Polynesian.
agree.
Um, there's a there's a lot in what you've asked, but let me just answer it this way. Um, so the tatau is your marks of service to your family,
Okay.
and so when you are looking for whose permission to get, the only people's permission you need is your parents or the elders of your family. If you don't have parents, the elders of your family, because your service is to them, no one else. So if somebody from another part of the world is challenging, well, who are you to get to tell? It's none of their business, because your service is not to that person. Your service is to your family. If your family say yes, no one else's opinion matters. Whether you speak the language, whether you know how to make the foods, or um, none of that matters. In fact, one of the ones that talks a lot about
Seems like you might have something to add to
Yeah.
that,
Well,
Mussy.
well, well. Tua, this is just me, just thinking, just on that this time. You need to ask the family because your family needs to gather the resources to pay the tupunga. Okay. If you can't, won't be able to do it yourself, this is just me. Tua. I'm just thinking, just right off the cuff, right here. You go and ask your family because unless you have all the money, if you're a young single adult, you don't have the financial resources or the resources to do it now, you go and ask the elders and your parents because they will have the resources to help you to pay that tufunga because it's not cheap. But that's just me. I'm just thinking off the cuff, and that's why I kind of laughed a little
You were
bit. But that's
laughing.
just me.
All right, all right. That's fair. That's fair.
that, well, not a lot, but he says a little that says a lot, is in the book of Chauchua by the late Tofayono Tanvasa. And he, in his book of Chauchua, he's saying that whole
What's tautua? Does that sound
Tautua,
familiar? Is that a
that's like
Samoan word?
Tautua is like service. Yeah, it's like where
Okay.
somebody fight patongia or
So
sama fight patongia.
kautua. Basically, it sounds like you say kautua, like
Mm,
the
mm,
people workers.
yeah,
Hmm. Okay.
whole thing, "Ta mua mule nguchu," first tattoo your mouth, is not a traditional saying. It's a very recent saying invented by those who don't live in Samoa. Because in the old days, why would you say such a thing? Because everybody spoke Samoan. Before the days of colonization, there was no other language. So the concept of "ta mua mule nguchu" didn't exist back then. Um, and in fact, the late Tofayono was saying, in the old days, um, there's the high chief, and then there's the Tula Fale. And the Tula Fale's job is to serve, to be the will of the high chief. Whatever the high chief wants, the Tula Fale makes happen. He wants food, the Tula Fale makes the food. He wants a wife, the Tula Fale goes to look for a wife. But there are certain villages where certain titles, only the Songaimiti, the person that has a tatau, only they can serve the sa'o. And so that's where you get this opportunity where if you have a tatau, you get the opportunity to learn. Then you know how your oratory, what words to speak. And so this is where
Hmm.
Tofayono was saying, in the old days, tā mua le tino, o ngā maua role awano e hao mea whaksamo, o ngā maua role poto le ngutu. First tattoo your body, then you get the opportunities to sit and learn with the knowledge holders, then your mouth will know what to speak. And so again, this is not something I invented.
So first pay your
mm,
dues,
mm,
and then you get access to the professor for
mm,
knowledge.
mm. Yeah. No, and that's what I'm thinking too. Like I'm just thinking like because it's very well documented that it was a lot of people in just regular Tongan society had tattoos, and I'm just thinking, if you're, let's just say, if you're a good warrior, but like you didn't have the resources, but you're well known on, I don't know, you clubbed. Let's just say you took over a Palangi ship and you clubbed most of that ship in that Palangi ship, and let's just say people recognize, dude, you're good. You need to get a taratao, and we'll pay for it. And it's like, dude, oh,
Yeah.
might as well. You know what I mean? To it. That's why I feel like. I feel like
Yeah,
that's
it's
how it
very
was.
feasible.
Very. I
Here's
feel like
a
it was a very normal, regular thing.
yeah. I mean,
Think it was. I don't think it was a big elevated thing. I don't know. That's just me, to I don't
I'm
know.
not familiar with what it was in Ha'amoa, but in Tonga, from a lot of the journals and the accounts, it was a very common thing.
Yes.
Very
Yeah.
common. Like almost every male, or at least a warrior male, had it,
Yeah.
right? And to the point where if you didn't have it and you were a male, people
Yeah.
made fun of you. Here's a funny comment here. I'm sorry, guys, that been getting carried away with the thing, but the T style says, where he says the Tula Fale gets
Yeah.
everything. It says the high chief wants a baby, the Tula Fale goes and gets it. See, hey, T style, which village in Tongatapu this Tula Fale live at?
Maria.
Oh,
That's funny.
money. All right. Let's get through this. We got a couple more minutes
The
here.
late Tofaiono
Yeah.
wrote about this in his book on Tautua. And it was such a small, I think it was half a page that he wrote about that. Whoa, but the stuff that meant was, you could write another book on that. And so Tāmo Mure Ngotu is not a traditional Samoan saying. It's a saying, and it looks like invented by those who live outside of Samoa. And I know definitely in my parents' generation, probably invented by them to stop us, our generation, from getting what they were banned from getting. And so coming back to, all you need is your parents' permission, or the permission of your elders, because that's who your service was to. No one else's opinion mattered.
Oh, I love that. Oh my gosh. You just healed my whole inner child right there.
Oh, yeah,
With
with
that,
trauma was
with that
overcome.
Corero, really,
Masi,
really did. It's so
malo
Keep that
sa.
in your
insightful as well
personal
because,
family. It's a personal
just quick
thing. No?
scrolling through some of the reasons as to why people are debating in the comment section of this, they're peeling back so many different layers. And like you said, there's so many contextual layers, cultural layers to dive into here. So I thank you so much for taking me on this massive journey through time of our tatau. And my final question is, she mentioned in her post that she's not trying to revive the Tongan stylistic way of this tatsau, but what would that, even that word revival, like, and you were touching on it before, like how do you see more of our Pacific people reclaiming, or stepping back into these traditional tatsau markings of ours?
It's because of the national boundaries we now have, that we think we're, Niue, Samoan, Tongan, Cook Island, because we think we are those national boundaries. I mean, you've seen some of the opinions. We're hardcore on these national boundaries, but I think as as a as a people, as different peoples, we need to soften that. And I think once we soften that, once we are embracing that they are me, I am them, once we embrace one another in that regard, then I think a real conversation can happen as to what is a traditional one, what are some of the more modern takes of a traditional one. In Samoa, we have this proverb, e tu maule, e sui le whainga, ai tu maule whaavai. Change the practice, but keep the foundation. And so if we're going to keep the foundation of the malu, what patterns can change? What patterns are more, when I was getting my tatau, um, one of the conversations I had with my tufunga, Suape Alaiva'a, he said that the everything on the tatau, everything on the traditional tatau, is to do with traditional navigation. And then one of the other tufunga li'ai whaiva imo said, that's true, but also we are an evolving people. And so some of the motifs we have now are more land-based motifs, land insects and stuff like that. And so as the practice of tatau is, starting to be restored, they're starting to invent newer motifs for a more modern context. And so I think, as we embrace each other, as we become less divisive and more embracing, there can be better conversation about what that could look like, and more maybe agreements or even conversations around what are the patterns, what are the patterns that keep, and what are the structures that keep, and what are the structures that can evolve and adapt and change. But I think that's best had in a more kind and embracing environment, much more kinder than it currently is. But I think the more we bring some of these old stories together, and hear and learn from one another, I think the more we're going to see how much connects us compared to the very little that disconnects us. And it's through that colonial Western lens that there's a lot of division. And I think when we get past that division, we see, whoa, they are my brothers, they are my sisters, they are me, I am them. Hey.
Oh man, I love that so much. I don't know when it's going to cut me off, but I'll thank you so much for Talanoa, and I will email Israel thanking you for.
Maria, I think that's pretty much the end of it. Any closing thoughts, Masi?
Just that last bit he kind of mentioned with the whole Tao stuff. I'm just thinking like how and I feel I'm agreement with him on that the Tao kind of really started with the constellation, right? Because that's like the founding thing. I'm thinking like, you know, whoever, like, you come with a group of people, go to a new island or discovered a new island, you get there, the Tao, you come with someone who's good at Tao, the Tao's a Maui, whoever has the Maui title, and it's like all these motifs of the constellation of the stars, right? And obviously over time it's changed to like, birds or native
Fish,
plants,
yeah.
fish, right? But I do feel like that was, and that to me, and that was a thing, right? You you get to certain places, and like you get to a new island, and you know discover a new island, somebody's good at tao, and you're kind of just free and stuff. It's like, yeah, can you do it? Obviously you're a high status of being, the Maui title holder. You can get that tattoo from the tufunga. But yeah, I'm just thinking, I'm just my like I mentioned before, I do feel like back in the days tattoo was just a normal thing if you wanted to get it and you had the resources, because the tufungas are not, if you're somebody who is, let's just say, did not like achieve something, or something that's gonna elevate the tufunga, if it's not by him tattooing you, getting that elevation from that, or getting that elevation from the resources you and your family have that can give to him, he was gonna do it. So those are the two ways I feel like a tufunga tatatao would tattoo somebody. If it was somebody that you didn't know, or somebody you're well known, that's gonna elevate him or maintain his status as being a prestigious tufunga, because I do feel like there was multiple tufungas, just which one you want to go. And within those tufungas, they were competing on who's coming, because you're still in the economic activity on who's having the most resources. I feel like that's why it was very common to practice. That's just my opinion. But I appreciate this video, Tua, and you bringing it up, because I do feel like it's a good topic to discuss. Malo.
Yep, Malo. I think I've mentioned everything I want to mention on the video itself. I just want to say thank you once again to all the viewers. I mean, appreciate it. Appreciate all the content that people are sharing, the likes, and also the comments. Really want to appreciate everyone. We just want to have conversations. It was great to hear this gentleman further push the idea of a Polynesian nation.
That's true.
We firmly believe in it. But it's always appreciative. I enjoy really good. The last one, I wasn't feeling the greatest, but I'm slowly getting my warriors to fight off the sickness I've been working on.
Come on, white blood cells. Do your job.
I know.
Come on.
Yeah. Maybe I need to go get a tatau to really build up my Polynesian white
Do
blood
it, and
cells.
then all your bad bloods will come out, and hopefully only the good ones stay in.
I'm gonna go tell the Tula Fale to go get me something, like T-Style said. But really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. And until next time, as always, stay curious and ask the bold questions. I appreciate it, everyone. Peace till next time.